Commissioner Banta? Here. Commissioner Barrera?
Here.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Here.
Commissioner Kang has an excused absence this evening. Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Vice Chair Cardoza?
Here.
Chair Keller?
Here.
We have a quorum of 6 commissioners present.
Thank you. I would like to open the floor for public comment on any item not on this evening's agenda. So if there's anyone from the public who would like to address the commission, please step forward now. We will allow you 3 minutes. Okay, see no one come up, we will close that public comment and move on to the action recaps.
We have 3 action recaps for you. As you may recall, at your last meeting, you did not have a quorum present of those who had been present at the previous meeting, and therefore we were unable to approve those minutes. Then we also, that's the February 23rd minutes. We also have for you the minutes of your special meeting that occurred on March 9th and your last meeting on March 23rd. We have different combinations of commissioners who are eligible to vote on each of those, depending on who was here. If you'd like, I can, as you go through each one, I can tell you who can vote and who can't.
That would probably be helpful.
Okay. So the first one is February 23rd. And for that one, Commissioners Banta, Donaldson, Vice Chair Cardoza, and Chair Keller were present. Commissioner Thompson was not on the commission yet, and Commissioners Kang and Barrera were absent.
Okay, can I have a motion for these?
I move approval.
I'll second that.
Without exception?
With those abstentions as noted.
Yes.
Okay.
And that will be for the other 2 as well.
Oh, really?
No, they each have to
For
go.
any abstentions.
Oh, okay. Well,
considered.
the abstentions for the March 9th meeting would be Commissioners Thompson and Kang.
I move approval.
And the rest of you are, yeah, okay.
And I'll second Gail's motion without exception there.
Okay.
Okay.
And then for March 23rd, it would be everyone except Commissioner Banta. And of course, Commissioner Kang is not here tonight, so he would also, well, he'd be noted as absent.
I move approval.
I second it.
And without exception again? Okay, all 3 of those go through.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Can we have your director's report, please?
Certainly. The City Council has actually had 3 meetings since your last meeting. The 2 regular ones on April 4th and April 18th, and then they had a special meeting this afternoon. Actually, they're still meeting right now in closed session. On April 4th, they passed the second reading of the 2 ordinances to regulate cannabis businesses in Emeryville. As you may recall, these included amendments to the planning regulations that would create 2 new use classifications, cannabis sales and cannabis manufacturing, and would include locational criteria and permitting procedures for each, and amendments to Title V of the Municipal Code to create an operator's permit. As you may recall, these were reviewed by the Commission at your December 8th meeting, at which you recommended approval of the planning regulation amendment with minor modifications. In passing the ordinance on second reading to amend the planning regulations, the Council accepted all of the Commission's modifications. On April 18th, the Council approved the annual increase in the development impact fees, which is based on the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index for San Francisco. This includes the Parks and Recreation Facility Impact Fee, the Transportation Facility Impact Fee, and the Affordable Housing Impact Fee. This year's increase was a whopping 0.44%, and it will take effect on July 1st. The Council reviewed and approved a request for qualifications and proposals for an affordable senior housing project on the former Recreation Center site at 4300 San Pablo Avenue, which is at the corner of 43rd Street and San Pablo. They heard an update on implementation of the Fair Workweek Ordinance and considered a contract with Mills College for outreach and education. The Council continued consideration of that contract to the special meeting that occurred about an hour and a half ago on April 27th, where they approved the contract. And they also continued a discussion about a last-minute proposal that was submitted today by the Center for Popular Democracy and the Alliance for Californians for Community Empowerment to a future council meeting. back to April 18th. The council was to have considered a facade improvement grant program, but they decided to continue that to their May 16th meeting following the joint session with you on small businesses, which will be in the afternoon on May 16th. And finally, the council passed the first reading of an ordinance adding lead safety provisions to the building regulations, which will reinforce existing federal law. And on other matters, I just want to remind you again that the joint meeting with the City Council to consider ways that the city can assist small businesses is scheduled for Tuesday, May 16th from 1 to 3 p.m. in the community room at the Emeryville Center for Community Life at 53rd and San Pablo. It will actually begin with a networking lunch that will be from 12 to 1, and then that will be followed by the study session from 1 to 3. So I encourage you all to come before 1 o'clock so you can have some food and network with local businesses before the meeting. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Very good, thank you. Any questions of the director? Alrighty, thank you. We'll move on to disclosures of conflicts of interest and ex parte communications. So if we could start with ex parte. Has anyone met with either of the applicants for tonight? Okay, and then conflicts of interest.
I'm going to have to recuse myself on the study sessions because I work for a company that does work for the applicant.
And I will be recusing for the public market signage because I live across the street. Alrighty, that said, we can now go on to our first item on our busy agenda for the study sessions, Sherwin-Williams Architectural FDP. Can we have the staff report, please?
Good evening, Commissioner Keller and other commission members. This is the second study session on the Sherwin-Williams Architecture FTP. As you know, in January, you had the first study sessions for this project, and the trend is going to remain the same. We are going to have two separate FTPs, one for the park and open space and one for the buildings alone. So this is, the first one is for the buildings by themselves. So in January, some of the key comments that were made at the study session included the need for continuity among design styles, with brick being used as a unifying material. The courtyards, it was suggested, should face west instead of east. The railroad side should not be treated as the back of the building. It was suggested that there should be more variation in what they are calling the park district, and that should have a darker color palette. A lighter color palette was suggested for the rail district, or for the buildings along the railroad line, and in the same district, limited use of plaster was suggested. An idea called Incredible Edibles was introduced, which involves installation of edibles that anyone can pick. Apparently it's from Great Britain. And it was emphasized that, or suggested, that travertine be used over stucco. The detailed comments are outlined in the staff report. So this is the basic site plan that you're very familiar with, and one major departure from the PUD approval is going to be in the PUD. If you recall, this building, B1 building, was designated as a standalone affordable housing building. The developer since then has changed its mind, and they are going to distribute the required affordable units throughout the 4 buildings. This is something that staff had recommended in the beginning, and it's in compliance with our code, so it's a step in the right direction. Total number of affordable units remain the same. That doesn't change. But so when you're looking at this building, you need to just keep in mind that this building is no different than the other 4 buildings, because there were some recommendations and suggestions made that, especially regarding open spaces and their location vis-a-vis the affordable, standalone affordable units. So those ideas are now moot, since the affordable units are going to be spread throughout the 4 buildings. So just taking up the first level of all the 4 buildings in B1. What you see in blue and various shades of blue are units, and different shades of blue designate whether it's a studio or 1 unit, or 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom units. The yellow or the mustard is for retail. So in B1, the small retail space corners at the Hubbard Street extension and Sherwin Avenue. What you see in this extremely light blue are live-up units, and the darker blue represent units as well. This orange color, let's go with that, anywhere represents residential amenities in the buildings. So this building, it does not have any parking. All the parking for this building will be accommodated in B2. The B2 building is a garage building. It will have 120, I'm sorry, B2 will have 123 units, and these are all enclosing the perimeter of the building with parking in between. And this will be providing parking for B1, and of course for units in B2, a portion of parking belonging to parcel C, and also a portion in parcel D. These areas, which are orange, are residential amenities. They also introduce a concept of co-working space, which I will let them explain to you in terms of what they have in mind when they mean by co-working space. It's a question that staff had with them, and it's my understanding it is being developed. So that's what this area fronting Hubbard Street extension would be. The lobby to this building occurs right here, and the entry to the garage, the pedestrian entry, occurs at this corner, and the vehicular entry is off 56th Street right here. Building C, which fronts the open space as well as the greenway, has parking, about 50 parking spaces on the ground level. Live-work units front Hubbard Street. There is a small commercial or retail space at this corner facing Hubbard and the open space area. And this is residential amenity, and at the moment is assigned to be a fitness center. Building and the entry to the parking space, the vehicular entry to the parking space will occur off Hubbard Street, with the lobby area being at this corner. Building D, this has, I believe, let me just make sure, it's a 170 unit building. And it has 2 levels of parking with units with 2 courtyards, as you'll see in subsequent upper floor areas. So this is the 2nd level, and as you can see, there is a courtyard on building C at the 2nd level. Building B and D are parking areas, and there are units in B1. At the 3rd level, you see courtyards in building D, which initially were facing east and now are facing west, as a comment that was made in the January study session. And 4th to 6th levels are pretty much approximately the same, with parking in B2 and units around the parking, and as well as units along other buildings as well. At the top level, mainly units in building D. These 2 are the tallest buildings, and in building B2, you have some amenities which include a clubhouse, a swimming pool, and a terrace area, and these would be open to all the tenants in the complex. In terms of the building facades and building materials, I'm going to leave that to the applicant to go through that. They have actually an animation as well that will walk you through a 3D visualization, which will give you a better idea of how the various materials are, the various roof lines occur, and the various design details. I'm going to now go through a few of the basic applicable plans and policies policies which apply to the buildings, and they have been outlined in detail, mainly for the applicant, making sure that they are aware of the relevant guidelines that apply to these buildings. And I will briefly go through the main ones for the Commission. So the Park Avenue District Plan guidelines, a couple of the main things is that it asks that the new buildings are compatible with the architectural patterns of the older brick and concrete industrial buildings. It asks specifically to avoid any large blank walls, and to place main pedestrian entries on the street, and to conceal and integrate utilities. We have an extensive citywide design guidelines, and there are numerous policies regarding building massing, building form, building articulation, building entrances, architectural details, and of course, family-friendly design guidelines. These have been outlined in the staff report specifically for the applicant and the architectural team to ensure that they look at them, and as the project develops and as the details are developed, that they are following what is in our guidelines. In terms of staff comments, if none. All right, so first there was a concern regarding the location of the retail, the cafe, the co-working space, and also the art gallery, which was in the original PUD. And this was regarding the visibility of these spaces to attract customers. And the Economic Development and Housing staff has specifically asked that the developer meet with them and kind of, brainstorm the location of the different spaces, the different non-residential spaces that they have. There was also a suggestion to include or consider including a childcare facility in the residential amenity area fronting the public park in the building C. There is a utility area in building C fronting the greenway, which needs to be relocated. We do not want utilities along our greenway, so they need to work in terms of making sure that it's not visible along that side of the building. And the city recently passed a public art master plan, and this calls for a greenway artwork project that envisions a series of murals, crosswalk treatments, and the staff feels that the applicant has a unique opportunity to use the project's public art requirements to implement some of the projects identified in the master plan. Some of the key pages have been attached to the staff report for the developer to kind of look at them and consider that in the next round of revised plans. Staff has also hired architect Arnold Mamarella. I think some of you may be familiar with him. He was the person we had hired to develop the family-friendly design guidelines, and he also assisted us in reviewing different FTP plans for the marketplace, specifically for the family design guidelines. And given the size of this project and the number of units which will need to comply with family design guidelines, we have hired him to look at these plans as well. As you know, at the moment, the floor plans have not been developed, so we have set up a meeting and with the architect, with Arnold and the developer team after this study session, so that we start off making sure that right from the beginning, the family-friendly design guidelines are complied with, and then looked so that we have less difficulty as we did during the marketplace projects. And these are some of the suggestions and comments that Arnold has made to the design to the preliminary design that we have in front, and these have been outlined in the staff report, and here I'm going to just briefly go through a few of them, which I feel are some of the key things. And the suggestion is for more variation in building form and architecture by including varying roof lines and roof shapes, and the treatment of corners of building B2 and building B1 are good examples of what can be done elsewhere in the other corners in building C and building D in particular. Also to consider ways to increase diversity in the unit plans and to include two-level units. His suggestion is that a good target to include two-level units would be about 20 to 25% of the units. But the two-level units also help in kind of, help in providing a variety of unit types that would attract families instead of a flat one-level units. And this is also evident in terms of the units in townhouses, which prove to be pretty popular among families, and where they are preferred over a building. And if you look at the Glass House project, which is a combination of townhouses and straight-up apartment buildings, anecdotal evidence suggests that the townhouses tend to be rented by families more than the units themselves. The suggestion is also that the units at the uppermost levels should be 2 stories with roof variation and or have vaulted ceilings rather than flat ceiling or flat roof units, and to consider providing this in at least one building. For the courtyard level units, consider how to make these units more family friendly and with usable private patios or other similar features. So that sort of is in brief some of the comments that have been made by Arnold, and I would suggest that the applicant team look closely at the suggestions that have been made. And some of the questions that we have for the Commission today include that does the Commission believe that the proposed design, materials, and aesthetics are successful in providing adequate attention to the historic and industrial roots of the community? And this is a key guideline of the Park Avenue District Plan. And while this plan was being outlined and approved, they did consider the potential redevelopment of this site. And that's why I'm asking this question specifically. And of course, if you have any specific comments regarding design, colors, and materials. Does the Commission agree that the proposed brick-colored cement plaster adjacent to the brick veneer on building B1 be replaced with actual brick veneer? This is the building B1 which fronts Sherwin Avenue. Should the project implement the applicable elements of the public art master plan and use the public art requirements to implement some of the projects outlined in this master plan? Does the Commission support incorporation of sustainable green features such as green roofs and or solar panels? And that are the basic questions that we have for the Commission, and our recommendation is that you respond to these issues that we think that we need your input in, and of course any other design concepts that you see in the plans. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Maru. Are there questions of the Commission? Go ahead.
Do we have any other developments or done any other developments in Emeryville where the parking has not been in the building itself? I mean, there's some distance involved going from this one building, which has 2/3 of the parking, to
Correct.
units.
I can chime in on that. The Emery Station complex, the Wareham development around the train station, there are 3 buildings there that were all approved at the same time in the 1990s, the terraces, the Emery Station 1 building, and the Emery Station North building. They are all under a single conditional use permit. The parking for those 3 buildings is kind of spread throughout all 3 buildings. I believe all the residential parking is in the residential building, but the office parking is in some of the other buildings, and a portion of it was on the Amtrak parking lot site and is now going to be in the Transit Center garage. So
The residential is all in
residential is all in the same.
So there's no other situations like that?
Can't say that 100% for sure. I can't think of any others.
Our provision does allow parking to be provided off-site, so it's not that the planning code does not have not thought about this issue of providing.
Well, and just let me say that it's kind of academic at this point because it's part of the approved PUD that was approved by the City Council
Oh, so
with a recommendation from the Planning Commission. So that's
Not
kind of
subject for discussion. Okay.
pretty much, yeah, right.
Meru, thanks for the great presentation. And did the applicant provide staff with any samples of materials or any other photographs of the types of materials they're planning on using, or photographs of buildings they thought would be representative of what they're intending to do?
Nothing more than what you have in your plans.
Thank you.
And I would just like to remind you that these are, we expect a couple of more, at least, rounds of study sessions, and the idea is that nothing is really set in stone. And, you know, maybe after this, things are going to start getting more concretized, and at that time, I would be asking, you know, once the, I think the materials are still, you know, floating, so.
Meru, how much is the public art requirement for this project? And how much would be dedicated to implement the elements in the master plan?
So it's dependent on the valuation of the buildings, so it's 0.05% of the valuation, and that can be distributed either. Generally, we would like the public art pieces to be visible by all public, and this has been, you know, the implementation of that, it has been, you know, a little bit mixed. Most of them do tend to be outside of the building, visible to everybody, not just the tenants or the residents. But some of them have also been in the lobbies, which may not be necessarily, you know, visible to the public. And they do have the flexibility to move it around. In terms of the money. What it would work out is there would be a valuation, there would be a total amount of money that they would have to provide public art. They can also write a check, but for a project of this size, I think they're better off, and we would encourage them to use actual public art. And in terms of how much of that can be used to implement the master plan, it's really up to you. You know, it's up to you to suggest if you have any, but at this point, staff is just recommending that they look into this, and that this is a unique opportunity since we've just planned, and especially since they have a considerable section of the greenway in particular, and the master plan does talk about how the vision that they have for the greenway. I think it's a good opportunity for them to use the funds available to them.
Great, thank you.
But on that note, real quickly, this project was approved before the master plan was completed, is that right?
The PUD, yes.
Okay.
Although the public art is triggered with the FDPs.
That doesn't preclude you from including conditions about it in the FDPs.
Okay. Oh, good. Good to know.
So, yeah, I have a question just about the green features. Has there been discussion already? Are there things?
On the green features? No.
Okay, there has not been discussion.
There hasn't been. It hasn't been proposed, and staff feels that, you know, such a large project will benefit from some kind of green elements.
Okay. No, and the reason I asked is because, you know, typically they are integrated from the site design phase, and climate analysis is completed and things like that. So didn't know if that had been done or not.
No.
Okay.
And then just, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. And just another question about the parking. In your presentation, you had said that the building B2 is going to help park B1 and some of C, but isn't it also all of the parking for A?
Correct. Yes. Sorry.
So it's
You're
all of the parking for A, all of the parking for B2, and some of the parking for B, or B1 and in part B2.
You're absolutely correct.
Okay.
It just.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure I had it clear because I couldn't figure out where else it was going to go if that wasn't correct. Okay, that's the only question I had. I think that's all. Okay.
So there's just one more. I'd like to bring your attention to a letter that was emailed by Park to all of you, and a hard copy is on your on the dais. And Andrea will have a couple of comments regarding this letter at this time.
So at this time, the letter is advocating that the Planning Commission impose a condition of approval that would allow ground floor amenities to be open to the public for a fee. And I would advise you that there's not sufficient evidence in the record at this point where the city could impose such a condition. Obviously, people can ask the developer, and the developer may decide that they want to put it in, but that it would not be for the city to impose a condition.
Any questions? All right, thank you. So with that, we'll have the presentation from the developer.
So just, this is the animation right here, and then these are the PDFs of the plans.
Okay. And Maru, we just said we're going to do buildings first, then open space.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Chair Keller, fellow commissioners, Kevin Maw with Lennar. I'm sure everybody recognizes me except for Commissioner Thompson. I think this is our first study session with you with our project, so looking forward to your feedback. With me tonight, our usual team, so Ron Metzger, our architect and land planner, is going to be doing the first portion of the presentation tonight, and we've got a very fun 3D fly-through for the whole for the project. I think that's going to hopefully give a much better sense of our vision and where we're at in the overall design process. And then also with us this evening, Bill Schultz, I think who you've met a few times already here as well from EMA, will be covering all of the open space and park design elements that we have this evening as well. So real quickly, I just want to give you guys an update on overall kind of the project itself and what we've been doing from a community outreach standpoint over the last few months since our January study session. So the first one I just want to touch on is just the office building, what we call Building 131. That's what Sherwin-Williams used to call it. The update on that, and I think as we mentioned last time, Lennar is in the process of actually selling that building to a commercial developer. And so we are currently out for, we have a offering package out there for developers to look at. Our hope is to have a developer selected in the midsummer timeframe. And I think as Maru touched on last time, is that they would be coming forward with a separate FDP package to basically renovate that building for office use. And hopefully they'd probably, we'd ideally like to try to get them here as soon as possible, but my guess is probably late summer, early fall. They may be kind of getting on board. And so I think just to let you guys know how the parts and the pieces are coming together. So they're going to be coming on board hopefully later this year to show you their vision for renovating that building and breathing new life into it. And so tonight we're not going to touch too much on that area. We will show you kind of the pass through and kind of how it goes into the rest of the site, but a lot of the elements of that building will be for subsequent FDP study sessions and hearings. In addition to that, Maru did touch on this earlier. I just want to make sure that everybody understood that the standalone affordable housing building that we had looked at during the PDP stage is now off the table. And really the biggest driver on that was as we started reaching out to equity partners and financing options, getting feedback from them as they ran their numbers, and then also kind of the latest change in administration at the federal level and what they're doing or what they're thinking about doing with HUD and tax credits. Both of those headwinds just makes that a much more challenging proposition. And so as Maru mentioned, we're going back to the city's standard affordable housing ordinance, which is inclusionary throughout the whole project, kind of as a baseline. So just want to make everybody aware of that. And so from a community outreach perspective, since that last study session we had with you guys in January, we've actually, we've had 2 meetings with the Park Avenue Residents Committee, so one in March and one in April. So our whole goal was to kind of keep them at the table with us as the design is evolving and getting their feedback as we go along the way. So the hope is that as we come into these study sessions, that they've seen everything, they've provided comments, and so there's some consensus building as we go through this process. And so we've met with them twice. We're going to keep meeting with them as everything evolves. And so on a similar note, from a parks and open space planning standpoint, since that January meeting, we've had a study session with the Parks and Rec Committee, got good feedback from them back in early April. And then we also had a citywide parks meeting, which I know that Commissioner Barrera was at back on February 15th. Oh, I'm sorry, I got those backwards. The Parks and Rec study session was February 15th, and then the citywide park meeting was April 6th. So, but on that second citywide, then that was the second citywide park meeting where we basically invited everybody from the city, whoever was interested, come in. We had it at the ECCL. Come in, let's talk about kind of what you guys like to see, and from a park and open space design and programming standpoint. And the second one was actually where we laid out various uses for the parks and the open space and the configurations based on the feedback that we had gotten from the previous citywide park meeting that we had back in December. And so that was a well-received meeting, pretty good turnout, really good feedback. I think a lot of the community was receptive to everything we were proposing. There wasn't any kind of really major concerns that came up as part of that. And so all of these meetings are going to be ongoing. We're going to be going back to Parks and Rec for study sessions, I think in May again. And so just wanted to reiterate kind of the continued outreach and involvement that we're going to have. And so ultimately, one of the things that Maru had touched on was that in talking with Park, the Park Avenues Residence Committee, I think we've gotten some good consensus and positive feedback from them on the building architecture and the open space that you guys will be seeing this evening. And I think they've kind of, that what we've proposed has resonated with them, and I think they feel like we're very much headed in the right direction on that. The one thing that they did bring up, and I think you saw in the letter, was looking at the amenity spaces and kind of could those be made public accessible. And so we've been having discussions with them, and kind of to bring you guys up to speed is that we are open to continuing those discussions, especially with our co-working space, which you will see this evening. That's a large frontage of amenity that we have along, and you'll see it here shortly, along the Hubbard Street frontage, which is similar to like a WeWork situation, where basically if people don't want to work from home but still want to go have meetings, have conference room space, or just work remotely and not go into the office, this is kind of that option. And so I think that is a natural fit of something where we could look at to potentially open that up to the larger public. And at this point, for us, it's a very new business concept. We're just now starting to roll this out throughout our company. And so as this kind of actually takes hold within our company and we kind of see what's working, what's not working, I think then we can really explore kind of how to basically potentially make that available to the public. But like staff mentioned tonight, I think we just want to just keep having that discussion. I don't think we'd be open to imposing a self-condition on that at this point. It's just too early to discuss, but I think we are open to having those discussions with the greater community. And so with that, I think I'm going to have Ron go ahead and start here. But like Maru mentioned, I think if we get some good feedback from you guys tonight, and if it seems like the general consensus feedback from the Planning Commission is that, hey, we're heading in the right direction, and I think if the community feels like we're heading in the right direction, depending on kind of the level of comments, we'd like to come back, if everything is working well, we'd like to come back and later this year for a hearing, depending on just the level of comments that are out there. So I don't know if we need another study session, but if we think we can, depending on the level of comments, if everything's kind of tracking well, then we'd love to go that route and have the kind of the formal hearing later this year. So without further ado, I will bring Ron up here, and he'll show you our fly through and go from there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So at our last meeting, we showed you general concepts of what we wanted to accomplish. The big theme that we're trying to do is create
your microphone. There you go.
Okay, create a community that is reflective of the park district, has the eclectic character, the industrial vibe, and just the energy that you have in that area. So in doing so, we identified 3 styles that we wanted to incorporate in the project. One was more of a warehouse style that reflected like the Pelco building, the existing Sherwin-Williams building, and the traditional kind of warehouse vocabulary. Another one was a derivation of that, where we took the warehouse themes at the base and then created a more contemporary expression of that at the higher level, and that was kind of building C, surrounded by the park. And then the third expression was a more industrial character, which we were locating on building D at the very north. So we've developed those 3 themes in more detail, which you'll see tonight. And we thought it would be, one thing that is different from what we submitted to Meru previously, we've brought the height of building B2 at the south edge down. So we limited those 4 units, and we're able to incorporate them into building C and D. So we have the same number of units at 500 overall, but that lowered the height and it created a better common amenity for all of the residents to share in doing that, and you'll see that tonight as well. So we thought, since the goal is to create a community that you would experience as an extension of the Park District, we would create an animation that would try to illustrate that. So we'll go from there. So this overall view shows what the project would look like, how it would relate to the scale and character of the existing building, how building like B1 steps down to Sherwin Avenue, how building B1 and B2 really reflect the character of building 131. You can see the gallery space as its own iconic element there at the corner, and then as you get into the more industrial building of building D at the north end of the site there. So building B1, again, reflects a lot of the buildings in this district. We have extended the brick all the way around. We thought that was a good idea. Building B2 is a slightly more contemporary version, but it reinforces that strong structural character of brick, and in this case, brick and plaster. The building C, which has that strong brick base, has a more contemporary, light feel of metal and fibercement panel. Building D has expressed metal structure, siding, and plaster. And then the gallery building has its own shape and form, which we thought was important to give it a more contemporary character and identification for that gallery space. So how you would experience this project, this is the park looking back. The buildings in their totality create a more dynamic expression of an urban space that are the backdrop for the park, which we think is important. And then at the ground level on building C, we're activating that with our fitness center, which will be open to the active spaces in the park. And then we also have a cafe that will anchor the corner for public to get beverages and whatnot at there. So this is the pass through from building 131 as the view coming underneath the building expands with views directly out into the park space. From the corner of Hubbard and Sherwin, you have retail anchoring that corner, again looking back towards the park. And then as you go down Hubbard, we have wide sidewalks and tree-lined streets. In some cases, we've taken the parking out, and so we can create large areas for landscape and for seating. You can see our ground floor amenities. This is the co-working space that Kevin mentioned, where it's a place for residents to come and meet other people and to be able to work, be kind of alone together with people. Kind of between building C and D, we're looking at creating more of a sculpture garden space as an extension of the Emeryville Greenway. And then this is the Greenway as it goes along the railroad tracks between building D and the railroad. So in addition to the public open space, we have common open space in every building, and each has its own character. So this is building B1 with their common open space as a roof terrace overlooking Sherwin. Building C is a more dynamic, more green open space with outdoor living elements. And then on top of building B1 is really our largest amenity space with an outdoor pool, spa, outdoor living spaces. We have a clubhouse up there, and it also offers really dynamic views of both the city of San Francisco and Oakland. So that's how that you would experience the project as you go forward. And we can answer any questions that you have, or we can look at anything in more detail as well.
Chair Keller, may I ask a question to the developer? Ron, can you tell us how accurate is the landscaping with the plans that have been submitted? Because I'm seeing this for the first time, and I haven't had a chance to check whether the two match. Also, who is going to be responsible for designing the open place, the courtyard spaces within individual buildings? Will it be your firm or will it be?
Okay, so a couple things. So the courtyard spaces, EMA is doing all of the open common public spaces at the ground level. We are doing all of the common spaces for residents that are on the buildings as part of the architecture. And the landscape that you're seeing here is a reflection of the actual landscape plan that you'll be seeing next, as well as the tree species, I believe, that to the extent that we can put them in the model.
So the landscaping that we are seeing is not what we have in our plans?
No, it is. It is.
It is, okay.
Yes.
They basically took the landscape plans and put them into their model.
Yeah. So the landscape architect has been modeling so EMA has been modeling the common landscape at ground level, and we've been modeling the terraces above.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The commission, do you have questions for the developer? Nothing so? Okay.
No questions?
Guys, any questions?
No. Ron, can you tell me this image that we're looking at here, do you know what date and time this is taken relative to sun position and so forth?
Yeah. Well, it looks like it would be slightly afternoon because the sun is casting
Shadow west, yeah.
And I don't know what kind of date that would be.
It changes per image, but I could get that information.
Yeah, we can find out what we actually used for this particular. I don't know offhand.
Okay. I have another question for you. In your package on sheet 26, which shows the third floor of building D.
Uh-huh. Should I go to that?
Yeah.
Sheet 26, so.
There you go.
Okay.
So the light tan is the circulation, correct?
Light tan is circulation.
Right. And so the circulation at the left-hand side that goes up to the north, or rather to the southwest, and ends in a stair.
Uh-huh.
And then opposite that, there's a corridor. It looks like it goes out to the courtyard. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Then there's a corridor opposite it for the other circulation, both of which serve the courtyard.
Yes.
And now, is there any reason why? Is there a specific reason why that is there, and or could that circulation be to the courtyard be relocated down one unit so it's between unit C2 and B3, as opposed to between unit D3 and C2?
Oh, I see. So you could get a connection across this way.
So you get a connection across all.
You know, that may work out well. We just have to look at how we get into this unit. That would be the only reason for that. But yeah, we can certainly look at creating that. And these, by the way, where we're showing resident storage, those were going to become units. When we took off the units off of building D, two of them become right here.
Okay.
Which we think is better anyway.
Great. Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
As you like.
Sorry?
As many as you like.
Okay, great. Let's see. So let's go to sheet 35, if you don't mind.
One more.
So right there, you showed item number 10, which is the metal trim.
Oh, yeah.
Right there, which is that kind of gray, those gray I-beams and so forth. Is that, and it has the cross braces, is that for a specific, is that like a circulation, or is that just at the end of a unit, or is it basically decorative, or what is that?
Well, this would be an express steel structure here. It kind of is freestanding, and we would integrate, in this case, we're integrating like our balcony for that unit. This is more of, it's more integrated into the skin of the building. So where this would be more structural, this would not be structural. It would be more decorative.
Got it. And then item 4, or which is, you mentioned, a ribbed metal panel. I can sort of make it out. It looks like it's horizontal.
Yes.
That's what you have in mind?
Yeah.
And then the fiber cement siding is whatever it turns out to be, whatever module.
And we're looking at that as a horizontal also.
Okay.
And, real quick, while we're on this slide, I think I just wanted to touch on, I know Maru had talked about earlier in the staff report about the public art and how that's being kind of located through the project, whether that's through they call it an art walk. Is that what the master plan was, Maru? And so ultimately, before I think we talked about in the previous study sessions that right here in this kind of main circulation meeting point where we had kind of had thought about using this as a public art sculpture area, like a sculpture garden. So it's basically kind of a node where the greenway and the community and the streets and everything kind of intersect. It's kind of like a central point where we would have a lot of the public art freestanding that the community could all enjoy. And so that's how we've shown it, and I think you'll see that in the fly-through. We put some representative art placeholders in there just to give everybody a feel for that. You don't see it here as much in the rendering, but the idea was to kind of create a gathering space where the community could enjoy some of the public art pieces. But at the end of the day, if the commission and the community all want to come back and say, hey, we wanted the art pieces spread out, so you do a walk through the property and have that type of a layout, we're not against that. I think it's, we're open to that feedback, but that currently this is how we've envisioned that public art concept.
Well, your fly-through showed some very nice looking pieces of sculpture.
Even a calder, you going to put that in there?
What's that?
It should look like you had a calder in there as well.
Yeah, a knockoff.
So I have one more question. On sheet 3, which is the first floor of all the buildings,
Yeah.
so if I'm living in building, I think it's B1, and I'm parking my car, can you walk me through from where I park to how I get into the building?
Yeah. So what you would do is you would park here, and you would come to there's an elevator right here, and you would come out to a lobby here. So we have lobbies on both sides of this building, and then you would walk directly across. And although we've called this bike, the idea it's not going to take up all of this space. We're going to wrap the lobby around it. So you just walk straight across, and the elevator would be right here.
Okay.
So we've done that. And similarly, if you were in building C and you're parking over here, you could take this elevator and go directly across to this elevator, or you could take this elevator and go directly across to this elevator. So we've tried to make that as convenient. The other thing about having, not all of the parking in one space, it helps activate these spaces around it, and we're trying to make it more alternative transit friendly as well.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry, actually I have one more question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sheet number 4. It shows building C with its courtyard facing to the east.
Yes.
And on building D, you faced your courtyards to the west.
Yes.
And on building B2, your top level courtyard faces out to the west. So can you tell me about the thinking for building C to face the courtyard east? Was that kind of a gift to Hubbard Street?
I think it is. I think it's actually quite nice having, you have the full height wall of building here, and so having this open up creates a nice differentiation in scale. So this is probably a 20-foot high wall along this edge, where this is a 65 to 70-foot high wall along this edge. So rather than going the other way, where you would have two opposing buildings of the same, well, this is 65 feet here. We thought it was nice for Hubbard Street to have this bit of open space.
Great, thank you very much.
All right.
Will your parking be unbundled?
Yes.
I did have one.
Well, let's go to Commissioner Bear, and we'll come back to you. Go ahead.
Can you go back to the rendering, please?
Of what we submitted to you?
Yeah, no, the one that you showed us, the video.
The flight through the windows, yeah.
Okay.
Can you point out if there are any spaces, any hardscape that you have control over the color?
All of it.
All of it? Okay, so, because there are some public sidewalks too, though, right? Like along Hubbard and 46th Street?
Correct.
And do they have control over those spaces, Maru? The hardscape color or, you know, kind of what material gets put on there?
They can suggest. The Public Works Director will have to accept.
Okay. Okay. Another question that I had was, I feel like I didn't see any elevations for the east side of building B2. And I was neither in the packet nor in the video.
Over by the art gallery, I guess.
Okay, let me just play and then I'll pause.
Yeah, if you can pause it there.
Okay.
So is that side the parking?
Yes, this is the exposed parking garage, and it's actually very similar to this wall without the windows. So it'll have a concrete frame with brick infill.
Okay, so is the idea to match the existing building?
To be similar, yeah.
Right, those are my only questions.
Okay. Go ahead.
I actually just had a question on number 32, page 32.
Okay, go back to that.
And I just wanted to check the orientation there. It looked like it was facing north, and you have the sun in your rendering, and I just wasn't sure. So if you can just confirm that.
So this is, we're looking to the north. So this building here is casting a shadow that way.
Okay, but normally you wouldn't have the sun in the north, it'd be in the south.
That's a reflection off of
The
one of
reflection,
the windows.
okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit
yeah, that's a
deceitful.
reflection, sorry.
That's why it's a
don't have to-
question. It
yeah.
was just a question to find out, to
the
clarify
sparkle.
what was going on there.
Yeah.
Okay, just have a couple. First of all, is it possible for us to get a copy of the fly-through so we could like
Yep.
look at it a little more slowly, slow-paced, and kind of?
Maru has that, yes.
That'd be great, because yeah, we can pause it and take a look at it and really kind of examine some things that we weren't able to tonight. So it'd be great if we get that. And in Building C, in the public open space areas, he showed a lot of raised planters and just kind of pathways. It didn't look like it had a lot of active space. You can probably see it better through this. Yeah, through this. I don't know whereabouts it was in there, but they were kind of flying through and looking at the.
Let's see.
And it's the art court, but it was. Yeah, I don't know. I think you're gonna have a hard time finding it exactly where it was. Yeah, there you go.
Oh.
Perfect, good job. So if you want to pause it there, yeah. So are a lot of those raised planters, just like the big ones in center, are those your flow-through planters for storm treatment, or?
We will likely have some flow-through planters on this level. We will also have some more on the west side where we have more property to do that. And
So go ahead.
And this was our first, quite frankly, our first draft to show how this was going to work and the geometry. And I'll listen to what your opinion. I have my opinion on the number of large planters here.
I would just like to see, I don't mind planting spaces, but something that was more a little at grade, and just providing more space for active space. You're going to have nice morning sun here. It's going to look out onto the Hubbard Street. I like the table concepts, but it just seems like you could do something that's a little bit more active, fire pits. And if you're going to market this towards children, it doesn't have to have a children's play space, but maybe a board game, overscaled. Just do something to where it looks corralled. The space doesn't look very user-friendly. So maybe just eliminating that large diamond-shaped one in the center would give you enough space for that if you didn't need it for flow-through. So just that suggestion, or a question, I just wanted to make sure that that's what it was, and I kind of went into a comment. Sorry about that. I tend to do that. No, it's out of order. But okay, I think that's all I have other than comments for later. So if we have nothing more, why don't you bring up the first image of the whole, the beginning of that, and then that way when the public comment comes up, they can. Oh, maybe not. Here, go play again.
Maybe just click on that play again.
I'll play again. There we go.
It's not working.
Maybe shut it
Just
down.
close it.
Okay. Now let's try it.
Here, how don't you close the whole thing?
So then I have to find out from Maru.
It's right at the top.
Oh, right, the top
Oh.
left. There we
Okay.
go.
All right.
Maybe we're just somewhere in there there you go. Okay, so at this time, we'd like to open up the meeting for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please step forward and give us your name for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jack Gitsani, a member of Park and a resident at 1500 Park Avenue. Park has been meeting regularly with Lennar about the Sherwin-Williams development for a while now, and we'd like to thank Lennar for their willingness to listen to and respond to community input. The project looks better all the time, and we feel their willingness is really helping that. We do have one concern that's come up several times this evening, and that's because as the project evolved, it appears that there's less street-level retail space and more private amenities, and we would, for residents only of the Lennar project, we would like to encourage not privatizing spaces to the extent possible that would normally be public or semi-public in nature. While we focus on the quality of elements like architecture, public space design, traffic impacts, and other related things, at its most basic level, a project like this is all about human relations and human experiences. The other elements rise or fall based on how well or how poorly they impact individuals and the community. A community, of course, is built almost completely out of social relations. A neighborhood community is built out of the sense of shared purpose and common interest that develops over time as people interact with each other in a shared environment. If the public-facing parts of the buildings in this project are dedicated to exclusive, i.e. tenant-only uses, that turns both the buildings and the sidewalk areas surrounding them into non-welcoming spaces for the rest of the neighborhood. This wouldn't just exclude potential users of the facilities, it would also cut against the strands of interaction that build and strengthen a community over time. It would weaken and detract from the sense of community experienced by the neighborhood at large and also by the tenants of the development. Having a cohesive community is itself an amenity for those tenants. We feel that it is both the neighborhood's interest and the developer's interest as a future landlord in this community to take steps that strengthen the community rather than weaken it. With that in mind, Park would like to request that as much as possible, street-level public-facing parts of the buildings, when they are not actual residential units, be dedicated to either publicly accessible functions, such as retail spaces and community accessible amenities, or to semi-public functions, which are accessible to non-tenant neighborhood residents for a reasonable fee. We have no objection to the presence of exclusive private amenities such as laundry, gym facilities, pools on a non-street level, non-public facing parts of the building. It's the public facing parts of the buildings that we're concerned with. We hope that you take that into consideration as this project moves forward and so that it can become a valuable addition to Emeryville. I thank you for your time, and I thank Lennar again for their working along with the rest of the community because it really has made things look better all the time.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike McConnell, Emery Warehouse Lofts, and member of Park. I want to kind of underscore two things that Jack said. One is we've had an extraordinary relationship with Lennar. We're really pleased with the way this project is coming along. So much of what you're seeing today is a result of a lot of iterative interaction, and probably for every hour we spend with Lennar, we spend another 2 hours with our own residents and among ourselves. So this is real progress. We're really grateful to it. I walk over to Park on Powell from time to time with my dog, and I always feel like an intruder there because it's clearly, it's like, it doesn't feel like it's part of the community. It's their space. You walk through there, and there's a closed door, and there's a pool, and there's a closed door, and there's the weight room, or the exercise room, etc. And Park on Powell also demonstrates, I think, why there's less retail space in this current design. There's a lot of empty retail spaces on that on that site. So we're not pushing for more retail space, but I think this idea of having opened the spaces that are there, drawing people in and having people feel like this entire project that passed through the building, if there's nowhere to go except the park, if there are other things, a cafe, a coffee shop, a live work. I currently spend 2 afternoons a week at the live work space called Starbucks at Target. And if you sometime walk down Halleck Street through the garbage pit that is the underpass there to that lovely workspace, and you'll see why I think this would be a really nice place to have an alternative for that. So thanks very much. This is a conversation we've just begun in the last couple of months, so I think it will continue, but I just wanted to be sure you all knew where we're coming from.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
They're supposed to sign.
I'm Chris Peterson with the Artist Co-op and with Park. And I want to reiterate what both Jack and Mike have said, both about how wonderful it's been working with Lennar, but also about activating that space to make it more interactive for everyone. One of the nicest things about the neighborhood with the co-op in it and the Park Avenue area has been just the sense of community that's there that I think is unique, even within Emeryville, that is unique to that area, at least to my understanding it is. And I think that I would really hate to have that kind of impeded upon. So I really encourage the openness to having us, the public-facing things be more open to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Thompson would like to start us off with comments and suggestions.
Sure. Yeah, I think the conversation around the design, color, materials, I think that question about a material board would be really helpful, even if it's just small samples so people can get an understanding of what it really is. I think also, I don't know if Commissioner Barra was beginning to get it, but understanding what the ground surface material is. I know you guys are in initial concept, but I think there's enough, really high quality public ground space that it would be great to have the materiality understood a little better. I think I think also I would encourage you to think about green features. I think specifically that question about integrated features. Any passive strategies that you can integrate that aren't going to drive up cost. I know sometimes that applied features like green roofs and solar panels can drive up cost, and that can be a barrier. I'd still like you to consider them, take a look at them, understand the return on an investment on those, and consider them. A lot of the utilities are urging those sorts of things, and there's some good values out there. I didn't hear anything about certification, so. This would certainly be a candidate for building certification, for neighborhood development certification. LEED is what most people are using, but I think that I would also encourage that when thinking about green features. Those are my comments.
Okay, let's go on to Commissioner Barrera.
Sure. So I definitely think this project is headed in the right direction. It's very beautiful, and I appreciate all the hard work that you've put into interacting with the community.
Linda, bring your mic, so people on TV can hear you.
All right. But I do think that there's still work that needs to be done in terms of the building articulation and well, not necessarily the articulation, because there is some on a larger scale, but in terms of just varying the building forms a little bit more, and the roof lines, varying the roof lines. The parapet on the corners of building B1 are a pretty good example. So if there's any other opportunities for varying the roof lines a bit, especially in building C, I would say, because that one seems like the most kind of monotonous one in my opinion. But the other thing that I wanted to say about building C is that during our January 26th study session, you showed us an image of a building that looked very similar to this one that had shutters that opened from the outside. And I remember a few of the commissioners actually pointed that out as something that we appreciated and that we thought would kind of animate the exterior of the building. And since I think this building needs a little bit of animation, I would encourage that you go back to maybe taking a look at the video of the January 26th meeting or the packet that you gave us to kind of take a look at that, those shutters. Excuse me. I also agree with Commissioner Thompson about a material board being pretty helpful for us. So if you can bring that, that would be really great. And because there is quite a bit of hardscape on the site, there's a great opportunity to add some colored shapes, a variety of material textures or permeable pavers, along the site. So when you get to that point, I would like to encourage a little bit more variation in the hardscape than what it looks like I saw here in the video. But and so can I answer Maru's questions from the staff report during this time that she had asked, those 4 questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I do think that question number 2, in terms of extending the brick veneer instead of using the colored cement plaster is a good idea, and I know you guys did it here and it looked pretty nice. And I am very supportive of incorporating green roofs and solar panels into the project, so I would like to encourage that we see something like that in the next round.
Buzz, you want to go before?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have spoken before on the fact that I think that I'd like to see the entire project with the brick facade, that we really have a campus here. We have shared facilities within the buildings, yet they look totally different from one another. Even building B1 looks like 2 different buildings that bumped into one another. And I think it's an opportunity to try and use the same vocabulary on all the buildings so that it looks like an integrated project rather than buildings that don't look anything alike. And I've said this before, and I know it's not the current thinking, but that's my opinion.
So do you mind, Ron, if you came to the podium again so I can have a little kind of show and tell on this stuff? So first of all, let me say that I think a lot of credit is due to everybody, the park group, for being so consistent and diligent in their representation of the community's interests, and to the city for the great job that they do, as always, with analyzing the application, and to the applicant for their thoroughness and their patience and their responsiveness. So it's really, I think, a really fantastic combination of forces at work here. And so let me just start by saying that I think the comments from Park about the ground level interface with the public, I think there's a lot of validity to that. And I understand that as a private development, you've got to take care of your occupants and, give them the amenities and perhaps the exclusivity that they might be expecting. I'm not sure, but in whatever way possible that you can open up to the public, I think it will benefit the community tremendously.
Yeah, we agree.
It's worth looking at. So my first question for you is, well, not question, but comment, was on page 9.
You just let me go back down. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. That's why.
Page 9. So you show here it shows building B2 with the pool and the rooftop terrace and so
Yes.
forth. And I'm assuming that that's in that location because B2 has the most parking, is that correct? So the most people are, let me ask this, is that pool area open to residents from the entire complex?
Yes. And it's there for two reasons. And one, as I mentioned, we've taken these 4 units off. And so now this is the concrete structure for the garage. And so the pool is on top of the concrete structure. And so then this is the wood frame structure that is terrace and outdoor living space that surround the pool. So this whole area can act as one large amenity. And then the other thing about this is because it's at the roof level, it has views out over the city and, well, both Oakland and San Francisco.
Right, so there, in other words, there's a structural reason for putting it there too. Okay.
Yeah.
Because my observation was going to be that an even more prime location for it would be in the southern end of Building C, because then you'd be overlooking the park and have an unimpeded view to the west.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but that's understandable. So, looking at Building C and the courtyard that you've explained is facing to the east, Hubbard Street, which I think does benefit Hubbard Street. I think, however, you know, the residents of that building, as your fly-through shows at the beginning, it gets to be in shade in the early afternoon and stays in shade for the rest of the day. And I think if you were to flip it and face it west as you did for Building D, that the occupants of that building would greatly benefit from the sunlight that they would come pouring in there the entire afternoon, at the end of the day, etc. Plus, it would have a terrace that overlooks the greenway, which is kind of nice. And I think Hubbard, of course, Hubbard's going to be in shadow anyway, and so putting the facade, having the facade mirror Building B2 on the other side, to me doesn't seem like that big a deficit for the street itself. That's my own opinion in any case. So my next comment is page 17.
17.
So you've drawn the garage, and then you have got you have the corridor going around it, and it looks like there's 2 walls. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you're going to have like a concrete wall and then a wood frame wall?
That is correct.
Next to it? Okay. Just wanted to be sure I understood what that was all about.
Yeah.
So let's go to, let's see here, to sheet 29. So I think that, you guys really have done a great job at creating, you wanted to create this narrative about the 3 styles, the 3 districts, and I think that's commendable. And I also understand the urge to create, I guess you might call it background buildings for the main event, which is the open space, which I think is a legitimate strategy and so forth. But these are really, this is an enormous project for any city, anywhere, and these are very big buildings. And what I would ask you to do is, looking back at I think the guidelines for about I guess building design from the city. There's a guideline E1 that says find opportunities for diversity, creativity, and innovation in building form. Now, if I'm going to this great park that you're building, this 2-acre park with all this great sunlight, and I'm looking up at these buildings, and I leave this park, at the end of the day, I don't know that I would remember what these buildings looked like. I would encourage you to be as creative as possible and make something that is memorable for the people who are coming here to visit it. And I think, for example, you struck that chord on sheet, let's see, what was the one where you were looking north on Hubbard? Yeah, sheet 32. So you have that, that simple articulation of steel in the corner there. It's a very simple thing, but it really has a tremendous impact. Yeah. I really would encourage you to do more of that. And as my fellow commissioner mentioned, the sliding shutters, which I'm sure have probably gone the way of value engineering, I don't know. But that kind of thing, not only articulation, but real strong gestures.
Yeah.
Where you are giving character to the building, because that character becomes a gift to the city itself. And of course, puts your project and your client in a stronger position in a competitive marketplace that one day, sooner or later, is going to have too many units in it, and you're going to have to compete for renters. So that's, I think, and I think sheet 36, I think, is an example where you, I think, succeeded quite nicely. This just happens to have a lot of articulation to it, but the black and against the brick is just a very successful traditional combination, and all these things really work nicely. I mean, there's nothing strong or innovative per se, but if you combine this with some of these, ask your client to let you go. And,
Give them carte blanche.
Well, and it was funny. I was talking with Ryan, who's our designer, architect, as we were coming down here. We were talking about Building C, and he's going, I really think it needs to go further. And so it's really interesting to hear you make that comment.
Well, I think all buildings, I think, are very respectable, restrained works of architecture. And I think, though, there, you don't, I'm sure your firm does not want to be found having your buildings described as banal or predictable. And for example, you have the art gallery building itself, which, I mean, that's a building that's going to hold art. Really. I mean, you want to do something that's going to call attention to it. All right, those are my comments.
Great. We always come back to everyone. If you could stay there, because I actually forgot to ask a couple questions that actually came from the project. But first, I do want to reiterate that I really support 90% of the comments made by our commission tonight, and I do thank you guys and staff for all your work you've done. Two areas that I disagree is I like the direction of Building C. I like the way it breaks up that mass on Hubbard Street. And not everyone is a sun worshiper, especially in this area. They find that it gets too hot. So I think having a balcony that looks east into the hills, I think that works okay with me. Commissioner Cardozo and I had this discussion last night at the opening at the public market. We both fundamentally disagree with the idea. I like the idea of the varied architecture. Basically, this town is nothing but a variation of architecture. And I like the vernacular of the newer buildings going towards the Legaretto building. That Legaretto building is very unique and very different. And I don't know that I really want to see, a bunch of brick buildings down that direction. And I really like that steel, that structural steel corner. That is something I definitely want to see kept there, and if it could be replicated or done something throughout or somewhere else in the project, as they're saying in Building C, I would definitely support that. So on my own thing, I have a couple things. Is you mentioned a bike share, but I don't see where that would be located. Is that going to be discussed more in the open space area? Okay, then we can wait for that then to talk about. And also, the talk about, and again, this might be discussed in the landscaping, so we could, matter of fact, we'll wait for that, because that's about the restroom there. So I do agree that the next time you come back, I would like to see more detail on the east side of Building B2, the parking structure side. That's very important. We often have seen garages end up being really unattractive, and nowadays we're no longer allowing a backside of a building, especially in a project like this. So we need to see definitely more details on that. And then there's a lot of opportunities. In every building you have bike spaces. So I think in going into my next tirade is we can look at that, those spaces and repurposing those. You have pet spaces, bike spaces, seem to be quite a few storage spaces. So before I get into my big topic, which I'm going to get a lot of support on, I think, now that I've heard some public speakers tonight. But first of all, I support your parking in the single garage, sharing it with the buildings. I think that is going to, encourage the transit use and the walkability of that. I think it's the way you make parking less attractive or cars less attractive is you make parking the cars not as easy. So if someone does not have a guaranteed space when they come home, or they're going to have to walk a little bit, they may say, hey, it's going to be easier to take the bus. I do that now. So I think that I really support that, and I'm glad you're doing that. I do support staff and all their suggestions and what everyone else said about trying to bring in some green features. I'd appreciate if you looked into that a little harder. And then because of the parking situation, the one thing I'm concerned with, and I'm experiencing in my own neighborhood, as you know, that my neighborhood's really building out, and there's probably 4 times the amount of units in my neighborhood now than there's going to be here. But double parking is getting to be a problem, particularly with Uber and Lyft picking and dropping off people. But what I see is if people can't park near their home, they're going to have to drop off their groceries somewhere. And where I live, there is a portico where people drop off their groceries, pick up a cart, and then they go park their car after they're done. And I see that happening in this project on the street, because they may not be able to get a parking space, so they're just going to park real quickly, double park on the street, and that is going to really become a problem. So I'd like to see, if you do parking, that maybe you'd make very short-term parking, 12-minute parking or something that then the city will need to enforce. That's another whole issue, but we need to make sure that there's not a continual problem of people double parking while they offload things to take to their unit. So that's a real important issue. So the other thing I'm going to go on about is the ground floor retail, or what we're calling that our ground floor active space. I believe at the time we were approving the PUD, I was a lone ranger in requesting that we make 8,000 the minimum rather than the 2,000 square feet, and I'm glad to hear the public is supporting that now, but it's a little behind the 8 ball because we cannot make that a condition. But I'd like for you guys to look at that a little more closely, looking at some of those bike spaces that you have. I'm looking at, there's another question I had. There's a thing called a resident cafe, and I'm not quite sure what that is. Why couldn't that just be a public cafe? What is the idea of resident cafe?
Well, our thought was, and again, it's kind of a new concept, is with the kind of co-working space to really create a more hospitality feel, something that might have a more robust kind of coffee kiosk, wine bar kind of thing. So it is something that helps support that kind of space, a kind of a resident gathering space that, again, could open out into the sidewalk. And it was meant as an amenity that kind of worked with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Ron characterized it properly. I think it's more of an extension of this co-working concept. We want kind of the more formal space, conference rooms, phone rooms, areas where people could, get work done, but also have a little bit more informal, where you could, sit down and have a glass of wine, work on your laptop. And so it's a concept.
And is there a reason that couldn't be open to the public?
Well, I think ultimately, if we get to the point where we're comfortable opening the entire co-working to the public, that would come with it.
Okay. Then the other question I have for the co-working is, instead of making this an amenity for the apartments co-work, why don't you lease that space to WeWork or something like that? Why doesn't it just become a true, real workspace that isn't just for the residents of Sherman-Williams, but maybe someone at 1500 Park? Why not market that to WeWork or somebody like that and create a true real working space and open the cafe as well? So I'd like you guys to think about, because I look at your drawings and I see people walking these streets and I go, where are all these people going to visit their neighbors? Because there's nothing in this neighborhood to go to other than the parking garage, the park, and it's a very active looking street, but there's nothing on. There's cafe tables, but there's no cafe. And I would like you guys to, and again, I wanted 8,000 square feet as a minimum of retail space, but we got 2,000. And then the question I had also is, let's see, show where the art gallery is.
That's right here.
Yeah, it says that it's 2,864 square feet. When you add that to the cafe space, you come up with 2,846, but you list that you're making the retail space at 2,916. So I don't know where the extra 70 square feet went.
Well, I think, Ron, you can double check me if I'm wrong, but the gallery space is in addition to the retail spaces. Okay. So that 2,946 should be added to this. Let's see here. Let's just go here. I'm heading the wrong way. Let's go to B1. So that is in addition to this retail space.
That's about
So this retail space and the other smaller one is the 2916?
No, there's actually, it's bigger than that,
This
isn't
is a little, this is around 2,000, the other one's around 900, yeah.
it? Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
so it's
this-
2116, or 2916, I'm sorry, yeah, okay.
And then-
So that's those two spaces, not including the art gallery?
Correct.
Okay,
So if
I
you add
couldn't
in
find
art
that
gallery,
distinction.
you're at, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I couldn't find that
5,000.
distinction there. Okay,
And then the other thing to note about this retail space is which we're targeting for a cafe restaurant use. We're going to be putting in grease interceptor, the exhaust vents, everything to kind of bring in that.
so the
food
tenant won't
use.
have to make those improvements?
Correct.
That's
Yeah,
great.
we're going to put that in day one.
Great.
But there's also a large outdoor seating dining area that you can see in the renderings that
Right.
would come with that of, what do you think that area is? Another 1,500 or so
Oh,
for that outdoor
well,
component? Or what do you think?
no, it's only like 200? Right that little square?
No. Well, doesn't it come out a little bit more? Yeah, it comes out a little bit. Yeah, it comes out a little. Maybe like 800 square feet.
So yeah, it's splitting hairs. It is a little more than it looks, but I'd like to see if you guys could do a lot more. And I understand the whole concept of, especially now with retail going online, it's going to be hard to find tenants. And I think we just need to get a little bit more creative. And people talk about Park on Powell, and to me, I'm beginning to think that retail space is very successful because since I've lived here since 2002, it has got the tenants faster than any building I've seen. We have one Medical One going in there. We have Ike's has been there the whole time. We've got an optometrist in there. I think there's another retail going in there. What I heard might be a pharmacy. So I think that space is becoming very successful, and they really don't have a lot of parking other than what's in the structure, and I think that's kind of difficult for people to find. So I understand it. I understand there's also benefits tax-wise if spaces aren't occupied right away. So let's just look at expanding that if you can. I would really appreciate, and I think the neighbors have expressed they would appreciate that, and some on the commission also, that it just needs more activity on that street to make it a true integrated neighborhood. And other than that, I think I can let you go.
Chairman, can I make a couple
You sure
more
can.
comments? Sorry.
No problem.
So page 26. We had talked about this earlier, about the access to the courtyards. I think the opportunity you have there between the left courtyard and the right courtyard to make a sight line connection between the two is really a great opportunity, and I'd encourage you to take a look at that and possibly adopt that. And on page 3, which is the overall site plan, I think in one of our earlier meetings I had tossed out this idea of a so-called sculpture circuit that goes around building B2 and C, that starts at the art gallery, goes down the alley between the existing building and B2, up the south side of B2 and C, along the west side of C, and then down 46th Street back to the art gallery. I remain an advocate for that concept because I think it engages the public in with the art gallery more thoroughly than they might otherwise be. The art gallery is at one corner. You've got the park, which is the main attraction, at the other. That sculpture circuit, which in and of itself will be a great event, and I think also an opportunity for you to interlace with it. I think there was talk at one time about plaques about the history of the area, and that would give you an opportunity to have this kind of this storyline that goes all the way around, that starts at the gallery and ends at the gallery. Thank you.
Can I make one more
You
comment?
definitely can. Everyone can.
I also want to just express my support for a couple of things that my fellow commissioners said. In terms of providing some more activity on the ground floor, I do think that we do need some more destination spots here. And if that co-working space and cafe can be made public, that would be a big, way to check that box. And the other thing I wanted to express my support about was Commissioner Banta's comments about being bold and creative and go all out and let your architect get crazy with it.
Come on, Kevin.
Yeah.
Let's open that wall a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
But, and I guess maybe just going back to the art walk versus the sculpture garden, I don't know if, you know, we're totally open, agnostic to either one of those. I don't know if the rest of the commissioners wanted to weigh in, and we'll go back and talk with Park as well to see what their thoughts were. I mean,
I think we can also have the opportunity during the Park and Open Space to add to that. That's why I plan to make my comments is during that time.
Okay.
Yeah. Alrighty, with that, we can close this item. And do we need a break, or can we move right to the next one? Moving on? Okay.
All right,
So
me
now-
again.
Yeah.
So,
Just for the public, for people who are at home, let me just say this is the Sherman-Williams Park, Public Park and Open Space FDP.
we have
Yeah,
to go
Maru
old
gets the
school.
first shot.
Or do we have?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Pass it down.
Okay, so this is the Park and Open Space FTP again, like I'd mentioned. We had a study session in January, and some of the key comments were that the landscaping that would be installed should be the kind that attracts wildlife, birds, and insects. There should be installation of exercise equipment, and the children play area should be near affordable housing building. At this point, that is moot since we no longer have a standalone affordable housing building. Installation of bleacher seating along the railroad, smooth transition between hardscape and landscape, generates use of public art, a circuit loop of sculpture around the site, as Commissioner Banta also mentioned earlier today. And again, the idea of the incredible edibles. And there was a comment, and this was a public comment, that the public park should not be a destination park and should be designed so that it appears and is for the neighborhood rather than a destination park. Again, a public comment was the majority of the space should be unprogrammed and flexible. So this is the basic program for the entire site. So let's start with the big open public park. The key thing to note here is that you have children, little tots play area here, and that's separated from the older children's play area with in terms of basketball, as well as there's also bocce ball court. There are seatings along the shaded areas along the park. And then we come to this corridor, which I believe they're calling the Boulevard District, and essentially it's just a run through which connects to the park along this area here, which is identified as number 7. This was the sculpture garden that Kevin had mentioned a little bit earlier today, and that's what they're focusing and envisioning this area to be. And there is a plaza area near the public gallery, the art gallery, that is going to be here. On the far end of the site, this area is identified as for dog park. And then you have several pages which go in detail of individual areas, and I'm going to just show you really quick so that the architects can walk you through. They probably have gotten more details at this point of time. And so as like I mentioned, this is the little tots, and the restroom is at this point located here, and I'm focusing on the restroom because there will be a comment regarding that. Essentially that the restroom cannot be here. There's no sewer line, and so it needs to be relocated. And so this is District 3, and this is the Hubbard Street area. And again, I want to point out to both the Commission as well as the applicant team some of the plans and policies which apply here, and they've been outlined in the staff report, and I'll be only highlighting a few of them here. And one concerns the Park Avenue District Plan. It states pretty clearly that all new street tree plantings should be ginkgo biloba trees. And so what it means is that the 2 streets that are being created, the Hubbard Street extension and the new 46th Street, should, according to the plan, have ginkgo biloba trees. We also have a park and recreation strategy plan, and that identifies the different recommended programs, and all of them at this point have been included. So even at this preliminary stage, it's in terms of programming, it complies with our park plan. And then we talked a little bit about the public art master plan and the green walk, the greenway element, the greenway walk element of the public art master plan. And this is essentially one of the things is that potential art components includes murals on the Sherwin-Williams site on buildings adjacent to the greenway walk. Also that there's a potential for artist designed functional pieces such as bike racks and bollards. And I know, in different cities, some of the bike racks, people just go crazy in terms of how much innovation that can be introduced in bike racks. And again, the crosswalk treatments, as one of the commissioners also mentioned. So there was the second community meeting that was held by the applicant at the ECCL complex on April 6th. About 12 people attended, including Council Member Martinez and Commissioner Barrera. One of the comments that was made that the bike parking should be near the restroom. There was a general appreciation for the aesthetic of the various open areas. And there were further clarifying questions that were responded to. The plan was also reviewed by the Park and Recreation Committee on February 15th, and they were actually assigned to go to this committee in January before your January study session. However, there was a lack of a quorum, and that meeting was canceled and then held on February 15th. So they have not seen what you are seeing. They are seeing what you saw, the concept ideas in January. And one of the comments that they made was the play area and separating the play areas out for the younger and the older children, which they have done and incorporated in the plans. They also noted that if any bocce ball coach should be included, then that would really work if the leasing office was willing to lend out balls. So the staff comments on the plans is, like I mentioned earlier, the location of the restroom. Where it is located, it cannot be. It needs to be relocated, and the suggestion is from the staff to be closer to Hubbard Street, again, so the south of the park, and that would be closer to the Hubbard Street. That would also be closer to the area where the small kids' play area is located. The suggestion was made to include seating near the dog park, so while the dogs are roaming, their patrons have a chance to sit. Inclusion of dog agility equipment. There's some really cool equipment, as I understand, out there, and it's kind of also pieces of art, actually. There was also a suggestion to include adult fitness stations in different parts of in different appropriate parts. And there was a suggestion to install a historical interpretive display along the greenway. So this has, in terms of some kind of displays that represent the history of the city as well of this area and the different things that were here would be a good way to display. And where you display it, we can talk more about that. Here the suggestion was along the greenway. Also, it was noted that any installation, operation, and maintenance of the art alley that they're proposing and the sculpture garden would need to be figured out and various details figured out in order for these spaces to be successful. In theory, they are fine, but the details, the devil lies in the details. So some of the questions for the commission is, does the commission consent with the current overall programming and with the specific elements of the various districts? Does the commission wish to add or exclude element or relocate different elements? Does the commission have recommendations for the materials in the plaza areas? So this would be next to the art gallery. Also between buildings B1 and B2, that's the corridor that connects Horton Street with the public park. Does the commission have any comments or preferences for the tree and the plant palette that the applicant has provided? So here I would like to again to mention that the Park Avenue District Plan recommends ginkgo trees for all street trees, all new street trees. And the proposal is that for the Hubbard Street extension and the 46th Street, they are proposing thornless honey locust or Chinese elm. For Sherwin Avenue and Horton Street, Sherwin Avenue, they're proposing ginkgo. And Horton Street, they are existing ginkgo trees, and I think they are going to be installing a couple of just only two or three more trees to fill in the gaps.
So Marie, while you're on that question or on that subject, how difficult is it for us to allow different trees? Do we have to do anything in terms of changing an ordinance, or, I mean, is it easier just to stick with the Park Avenue plan than to try to make a change in those trees?
So I asked our Diana Kina, who was very much involved in the writing of the Park Avenue plan, and she said that the committee was pretty clear that they wanted ginkgo everywhere. She felt that staff did not necessarily have the same idea, and the proposed trees, especially the honey locust, would be very appropriate. We also think that it's there should be diversity of trees, street trees. I mean, this is more an aesthetic and a philosophical idea. Yeah. And in terms of anything to be changed, in terms of what amendments, we'd have to figure out whether this is a standard or a guideline. Right. But things can be changed if they need to be, if the commission so desires.
Okay, I just want to know how much work it would take for us to allow those particular specified trees.
If I could chime in?
Sure.
I believe the Park Avenue District Plan provisions about this are considered guidelines, meaning, and the Park Avenue District Plan, it is an overlay plan that is incorporated into the zoning by reference, but it's not regulations. It's not regulatory. So I don't believe you need a variance or a code amendment or a plan amendment if you want to approve a different tree, as long as there's a good reason for it.
So we can
and it's
see
generally consistent with the spirit of the plan.
Yeah. Okay. So we can see how the commission feels at that part. I just want to know if that was worth considering or if it was just a no-starter.
Yeah, and it's similar to what we did on Horton Street regarding the sidewalk width. If you recall, the commission and the council was asked, and there was a trade-off: whether do you want to preserve the existing trees, or do you want the sidewalks to maintain what is outlined in our design guidelines? Right. And we went with preserving the trees. So.
Thank you. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all. So in terms of next steps for this, after the developer team takes your comments and works on them, it will go to the Park and Recreation Committee. It will also go to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, and after it has gone to these two committees, we will bring it back probably as a study session. So that concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer. And
sure, let's bring it to the commission for questions.
I have one. What's the status of the bike bridge?
I'm going to let Charlie answer that one in light of sudden personnel changes that are going to occur.
Well, it was imminent. It is imminent. I know you've been hearing that for a long time, but in my discussions with the Public Works Director, it sounds like they're getting real close with the railroad and with the various contracts that have to be let and all that kind of thing. As I'm sure you all know, I forwarded you the email that our Public Works Director has resigned. He will be here through the end of May, so he's going to be doing as much as he can on it before then. I've discussed this with the city manager, and she very much wants to bring on somebody in a consulting capacity, or perhaps whoever ends up as the acting Public Works Director to take that project over. It's a very important project for the city, so we're hopeful that it will remain on track, so to speak.
Any other questions?
Miru, I'm a little confused. There was a lot of reference to a bathroom or access to a bathroom for the public. Where was that originally proposed, and where is it proposed
let me
now
just
to
show
go?
that.
Oh, I see. That's it right there. Interesting.
So this little white square?
I see.
Yeah. So, so it can't be here, so the suggestion is to bring it closer to Hubbard.
So is it an actual room with a bathroom?
So that was my question. Is it going to be like Horton, is it going to be like Doyle Hollis Park, or is it going to be like the skate park?
My understanding, it's going to be like the skate park.
Okay, so that's like a portaloo. Have you seen the one at the skate park?
No, it's a portal.
It's a Portland. I mean,
You know, Maru wasn't there for our Parks and Rec meeting, but when we met with them and we met with the community, the overwhelming kind of preference was to go with the Portland Loo concept. Apparently, talking to Maurice, it's been working very well from a maintenance and crime deterrence standpoint.
Okay.
And I believe Councilmember Bowders was touting the benefits of it. And so we're totally fine going to that route, and wherever we can find the best home for it, we're up for that too.
so for Commissioner Banta, it's a lot like those that you see on the streets of San Francisco, a little smaller scale and not quite as enclosed and private. And it's right on the Park Street side, on the outside of that park.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, so Kevin, just follow up on that. So it's going to be just one, so the one person can use it at any given time?
Correct.
Just like in the, exactly like
Right.
the skate.
And that was the overwhelming feedback. They said that is the model that we want you guys to move forward with from the Parks and
And
Rec.
it gets locked up at night or something like that?
Do you guys know how that works at night? I don't know yet.
No, it's not locked at night.
Oh, it's newer, okay.
It's designed, it's very clever design. It's designed so that there are louvered vents at the bottom that are angled in such a way that you can't see in, to see the person in there, but you can see their feet. So you can tell if somebody is in there or not. So if the police need to go by and check it, they can just glance down and see if there's somebody in it. It also is illuminated with blue light to make it difficult for people to see their veins. And there's, it's got its own little built-in maintenance closet.
Right.
So you can just open up the maintenance closet and all the stuff they need to clean it is right there. So it's been working out very well.
Well, and that's a park that is frequented, or had been before it became a skate park, with homeless.
Right,
And
that's actually why we put it there.
Yeah, and it seems to be faring pretty well in its condition and everything.
Right.
Thank you. Any other questions of Maru? Okay, well, since you're up there, you want to start your presentation?
Yeah, I'll keep my portion short and sweet since we've covered quite a bit on the project. I think just touching on what Maru had said, moving the restroom, totally on board. I think the adult fitness, we're definitely on board with that as well. I think we're thinking about ringing that kind of close by to where the children's play area is, so adults can have the opportunity to exercise while their kids are also exercising, kind of mutual benefit there. Dog park seating, totally on the list for us to bring in with the dog play equipment, very much so as well. And to Chair Keller's earlier comment, we are doing the bike share, and I think we haven't found an exact home for it, but I think it's going to be right in the central part of that park. And let me actually bring up this plan, and then I'll have Bill come up and take the mic here. But we're thinking somewhere in the heart of this area where the public can have easy access to it, and kind of the center. And so maybe as we find the new home for the bathroom, and that'll kind of be a conjunctive design effort to locate the bike share station.
You might consider where you currently have the bathroom now, because that play space, because the bike share takes a bit of space. With all the parking, the locks, the kiosk that operates it for credit cards, I don't know if you're going to have the room to fit it in there at the play space, etc. But if you move the bathroom, that seems like a potential place there.
Yeah, maybe like up here in this area.
And it's still very visible from the street, which I think is really important.
I think the key is we want to keep it very much in the public realm.
Yes.
For easy access. So, yeah, I think without further ado, Bill, why don't you come up here and we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive here.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate your being out in the evening when you have other things you could be doing. So appreciate that from all of you. You've heard quite a bit already, and I think the video really says a lot. Maru questioned whether or not where did that come from? Yes, the architecture was done by LPAS, and our office was doing, basically taking the plan that I think you have in front of you, or what's on the screen, taking that and giving it a three-dimensional life in the video. So it was a combination of the two firms working together. So what you see is certainly the character of what we're intending to do, or what we're proposing, if you will. It also is very much the plan that's on the screen. What it is not indicative of is all the particular detail that Commissioner Thompson has talked about. What are the paving materials, what have you. That's not really indicative of it. You can't really show that in a video quickly. Also doesn't exactly show the plant material that we're talking about. Maybe a couple things that we could mention that were not so much talked about today. There is a good circulation system on here. Yes, the buildings are sizable, of course they are, but you can see that you can very easily move around the site between all the buildings. There's really no dead areas. It's very publicly exposed. It's publicly accessible. In our collective conversations among the whole team, we really believe that the public is very much invited to this. And I think with the community meetings that we've been talking about with a number of people in the room tonight, this is really their plan in very many ways. And access has always been very important, including the pass-through in the Sherwin-Williams building today. That is very much an important connection on through the project and connecting to the Greenway, which goes on across the railroad tracks and what have you. So this is going to make a very important connection, a number of connections actually. You're also, of course, able to wander between the buildings and have things that are going on there. Something else that was maybe not talked about, the edibles was talked about. We are suggesting a community garden. This came up at the community meetings, and right now it's in the upper corner. It could be other places as well, but this is one that's been identified. A lot of sunshine, a lot of good opportunity there. We have not exactly talked about how that's going to go, but some of our other projects that is actually monitored or maintained by an outside person. It's the farmer. So that's also a possibility. The Greenway has always come up in any of the meetings, any of the presentations. Some of I've been in, and some Jim Bensman that works with me has been in as well. Always it was, what is the material? What does it feel like out there? Is it very urban? Is it very stark? Is it very communicative? What is it? And I think really what came back through, it's a combination of, yes, invite the wildlife. That's probably going to be butterflies and birds and things like that. The other thing is the plant material does encourage that. And I think the idea was, as you're walking along the buildings, et cetera, on that Greenway, it's going to feel like a garden. It's going to feel like a natural garden, one that changes with the season. Maintenance, of course, will be an issue, but it will be either native or native-like materials. We talked a good bit about using Mediterranean kind of plant materials, succulents and what have you, that maintain well and look good at different times of the year. We have other projects where the comment has come back, yeah, the natives are great, but then the South African plant materials tend to bloom and when the natives are really kind of dormant, so that's really a nice idea. Tonight we talked about the commissioners talked about the idea of a art walk through the project. Art has come up so often in the community meetings. Every meeting, art has been emphasized. So of course, that's going to be a very important part of the landscape scene, which is the ground plane. Paving materials are important. I heard tonight that the city, some of these are public areas, and so the city, of course, will be looking at what materials are conducive to that. We worry about slip and falls and changes of textures. I heard about it's good to have changes of textures, and we do like that. We also run into snags when we change textures because there's no clue that you're changing from one texture to another, and it can lead to some issues, but we'll be looking at all of those things. One of the things we should also highlight is that both streets internal to the project will have a good measure of activity. Those are the primary access ways to the garage. One of the things that came up at the community meetings is sharing the street, sharing the paving. So it will be, yes, there'll be people walking. Yes, there'll be people on bikes. Yes, there will be people driving cars. And as was mentioned tonight, the Lyft and the Uber and what have you. All of that sort of activity, I think, causes slow movement. It also, I think, yes, crosswalks are important, and there's some primary ones shown here, but I think also there's going to be a lot of cross traffic. It's going to feel like a plaza, regardless of asphalt or whatnot. People will be very secure in moving around those spaces. The dog park came up very frequently. Of course, we've not detailed what's all going to go in there. That's going to be subject to some more discussions. The sculpture garden was talked about. Again, it's a good idea. The area of the plaza, outdoor plaza near the gallery, was talked about a lot. There is a substantial open wall for movie nights and those kinds of things, sharing things on the wall. That was also talked about. One other thing was the ability to watch the trains go by. It's a very important part of the character of this area. Talked about what the fencing is like out there, and is it permeable? Can you see it? And that we really came down to is the new pedestrian bridge that's going to go across the tracks is going to be the best place to view the trains. It's not anywhere nearly as good as it is within the project itself. Yes, there are some stoops and patios and whatnot on some of the units, so there's a lot of eyes on all of the public spaces, and that's a really important thing. Also, what came up tonight, and it's a little bit new to me, about the ginkgo biloba. It is a wonderful tree, and we certainly use it, and we don't have any issues with ginkgo. It's a fine tree. It goes deciduous, but that's conducive to the area. I think we will have to pay attention to the shade conditions once Building C and Building 2 elevations are really determined in their final heights. I am concerned that there's a good measure of shade between those two buildings, so we'll want to pay attention to the location of the trees relative to building faces, so they can not be reaching towards the middle, and then the type of trees so that they really do perform well. Fortunately, most of the site gets a lot of sunshine, and that's maybe the best benefit of all of this. As Maru mentioned earlier, it's nearly a 2-acre park. It's really quite fantastic. We are talking about real grass, which is a great luxury in California now. The idea of grass that would, not Kentucky bluegrass, it takes a lot of water, but there are some other grasses that are much more conducive to both play and sustainable characteristics. But the green by itself is going to be phenomenal because it's so terribly usable. Seating in many locations, it's informal seating. We also talked about the possibility of movable furniture. There's difficult and challenges with that, but they can also be somewhat movable, but are really movable. They can still be cabled down. I think people really do enjoy, and we talked about that with the community as well, the ability to have some influence over the immediate environment when you go sit down. If you can move the chair a little bit towards a little bit more shade, a little bit more sun, so those kinds of things. And I think we can run through the other documents if you'd like. I'm going the wrong way. These are enlargements, really. I think probably the most important thing is to pay attention to the imagery adjacent to it. This, again, is a product of the community meetings. We're talking about unconventional sort of furnishings, unconventional lighting systems, unconventional landscaping, and I think that came up very much. The neighborhood is, in my opinion, very sophisticated. They travel, they go around, and I think probably the residents are going to be of the same character, and therefore it wants to be appropriate to that. The paving materials and patterns and whatnot that we're showing, this is very intentional. Again, it's unconventional. We want it to be interesting to both the eye, and it's also interesting to pass through. The park, I mentioned, I think is really the highlight of the project because of its openness and significance. The shape and what have you is ours, but it really came from the community as well. We have a connection that goes through to the greenway. We also have a perimeter walkway that's internal, adjacent or separate from the street walkway system. It's a shaded walkway. Oftentimes you see the trees are remote from the walk, they're remote from the benches, and we talk with the community about it'd be great to sit next to the tree in the shade, and the tree also does really and truly shade the walkway, so they may be part of the walkway system as opposed to next to it, which you often see. There may be some limited mounding in here, some contouring that gives some relief to it, if you will. The basketball was pointed out, talked about already, bocce. So there's a lot of activity going on out here, and I think fitness is in the area of the building here. So kids' play area, we've looked at some very creative equipment. And I will compliment Lennar that they are interested in creative equipment. It's not the typical stuff you see. You already have one of those parks in Emeryville, so another one to add to it will be really great. And we'll be looking at that more as time goes by. Again, this really shows the sculpture garden and the greenway and the dog park. I heard the comment tonight about activities for the dogs. I'm not real familiar with that. I don't have a dog, but I'm sure we have dog people around us that will take care of that for you. So that's very important. What was not mentioned is we do need to get a fire truck through here. So you can kind of very easily sketch that there is a way to get a fire access around these buildings, which is important. We'll be working with the fire department to make sure the materials are conducive and what have you. That's kind of a normal thing. The bikeway or the bike sharing was talked about. The city has bike requirements, and that's going to be a combination of those that need to be in the buildings and then the ones that need to be outside too. There's a whole code system about short-term, long-term, covered, what have you, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. And that will all be complied with. The Boulevard District, which is really Hubbard and the other street, 46th, we've already talked about that a good bit, and I think the biggest thing that I'd like to see is the sharing of the paving so it's not so distinct. I like the idea of drop-off in here. We'll certainly be looking at that. We've gone through planting and what have you. We did look at a wide variety of tree as a palette, but all this will be looked at with the park folks and what have you, so we'll be looking at that. I think monoculture is never a really good idea, but there's room for plenty of ginkgo and some other things as well. So it'll be a very collaborative thing, I'm sure. And I don't know if, Kevin, you have anything you want to say about it? Otherwise, we're open to comments.
Yeah, no, I think look forward to everybody's feedback.
Alrighty. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Thompson?
I have questions.
Nothing? Okay. Commissioner? Nope. Commissioner Benta?
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. On sheet 3 that you walked us through just a moment ago, the photographs to the right.
Go back one.
Back on sheet 3, right there. They're really very beautiful, the different things you're showing here. So here's my question for you. In the right-hand column photograph, the middle one, it shows those big, looks like river rocks, but I guess they're probably polished concrete. Is that right?
I'm not exactly sure what they are. We pulled the image to say unconventional furnishings, as opposed to a park bench like you might see at McDonald's or something. The idea is they're unconventional.
Right.
So I'm not sure that's exactly what it's going to be, but the idea is things you don't normally see, and also I think we might have some millennials in here, what have you. They tend to lounge and not sit. So, or slouch, I think is the word correctly.
Well, in any case, those are really quite beautiful. I think that's a great, if you do that or something like that, that's quite nice. What about the wood planks beneath it? Is that something that you're going to have in various places, or is that just not in the cards?
Don't know yet. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I think it was more of like Bill was saying, it's more of the seating than the materiality beneath it.
Okay.
Probably that top left image is probably more representative of what we're thinking for that plaza area.
A comment on the wood, that there are materials out there that look like wood, but they're not. We've done some projects where it is done in concrete, and you can't tell the difference. You've been to all the theme parks, they do that very well. And there's also other pavers that have that look. I think most importantly is that overall the paving has to be versatile, it has to be durable, it has to be maintainable, and then some of it is within public areas, so it has to be really careful about that. But the idea is to get some texture in it somehow, in the right places.
So on the left-hand side of the bottom photograph of the lights, scalloping down, was that intended to imply a particular location where that might be installed?
Well, again, it's on the slide for the gallery. I think we have to have more conversation with the community about how that outdoor plaza is going to be used, the gallery courtyard. That may have some opportunity for some overhead lighting. I think creating a ceiling is always interesting. It's not something we would use extensively, but some places where people really gather and appreciate it.
Okay. So can we go to sheet number 4? There you go. So again, the photographs are very lovely. On the right-hand side, in the right column, in the middle photograph, you show a large tree surrounded by furniture and, again, a wood surface of some sort. Does this meant to imply to us that you will be bringing in very large specimens as far as trees are concerned for your landscaping?
I don't want to blow Lennar's budget right offhand, but I think the best comment would be we'd like to see, and I'm sure Lennar would agree, some maturity on some of the plant material. The key to the word is some. This is, of course, an image from Santana Row in San Jose. There are all the trees when they went in were not big, but some of them were, which added some character. So I think there'll be a landscape budget that's appropriate for a project of this size. And then we would work with Lennar to develop a hierarchy for the use of the money so that it isn't all baby stuff. Some would be very baby and other stuff would be more mature. So right. I think it'll be a nice mix so it feels good when it goes in.
And then on sheet number 5, your photographs, again, the bottom right, you show, again, sort of a wood plank walkway and then wood siding to looks like a planter and then a wood bench.
That's a borrowed image from the High Line in New York, which came up at the community meetings. A lot of everybody loves the High Line right now. It's very much in vogue. I think there can be some places where people really do gather that we would do something special. It won't be everywhere. It's not going to work out. But the idea here was the sculpture garden, that if we do raised planters, that those raised planters might have some character to them that really feels good. And also when you get, if we're inviting people to be close to some of the raised walls, they want to feel good. Slumpstone doesn't. So, but again, in deference to, it is a commercial project, being careful with the budget, and don't spread the money everywhere so you don't really notice it, but put it in some areas that feel special, and that'll really make you feel good. So that's the idea.
Great, thank you.
Sir.
The path along the railroad track, you have part gray and part brown. Is that part for jogging and part for bikes, or?
Well, I think what you're noticing is that there is a limit. This is the permanently paved material. Whether it's going to be concrete, asphalt, I don't think we really know yet. Again, that's going to be a commentary with the city. The other piece adjacent to it shows the limit of the fire truck. The fire access road.
Oh, I see. So that would make it wide enough for a fire truck? Is that the idea?
Yeah, we need to get the fire truck through there. You can also see here there's a turnaround for the fire truck through the Bark Park. There, I got it.
And Buzz, just to clarify, that greenway walking, or the surface there will actually comply with the greenway standard that throughout the whole city. And I believe at the PDP hearing, we had gotten feedback from council members, instead of going half DG, half concrete, to going full concrete, I believe. That was the, yes.
I recall that too.
Yeah, so a 20-foot wide concrete path, where there allows for more kind of intermingling of bicyclists and joggers, and doesn't kind of constrain some of the circulation there.
It's basically 20 feet wide, but the paving is different.
No, it's all actually going to be the same.
Yeah.
20 feet wide, and it'll be the same.
20 feet wide of that concrete material, the greenway material.
In the video, I saw a lot of trees and raised planters, but is that only going to be in the sculpture garden area, or are the trees along the paths also going to be in raised planters?
We'll do raised planters where it really makes sense. The sculpture garden may make sense. Again, this is a concept at the moment. Normally speaking, we wouldn't be doing raised planters.
And is the lawn area flat, or is it going to...
Well, it's a really good comment, too. There will be some water storage, and there's some SWIP. There's other functional issues that we need to deal with, too. The idea is it's functionally flat, so that you can play ball, you can do volleyball, you can do games out there and what have you, whether it's got a concave to it so we can store water, or whether it's got some other character to it, but it functionally will be flat.
And you pointed out some wildlife areas, and I was just wondering if you can talk a bit about the species that you have in the back pages of the packet that we got, and how if there are any plants that relate in terms of host plants for the wildlife and nectar plants or feeding plants for them.
This is a very summarized version of what will be used. Jim Bensman, who is here, raise your hand. He is a far better plantsman than I am in this region. And we have talked a good bit already about looking for a mix of plant materials that will attract butterflies and hummingbirds and all these kinds of things. And this is just a taste. There'll be much more. Maybe, well, the salvia will certainly survive, but it will be materials that are conducive to wildlife. Okay. Not bobcats and things like that, right. But the friendly ones.
So are we gonna get some more detailed information at the next round in terms of like the actual furniture that you're going to be using and the materials that we're going to see on the hardscape and this plant species? Are the more details for that coming at the next session? Because it seems like this is still pretty conceptual. Okay.
I think you're free to ask for what you want.
I think the general response is yes. I think the thought is that if the commissioners were of the same mindset as the community and the Park Avenue Committee, our next homework assignment is to take it to the next level of detail for the next one.
We want things like all the pretty pictures that you have here that Commissioner Banta was pointing out that he liked.
You want the reality?
Yes, yeah, more of the reality.
More reality?
Yes.
And then last question. Are we still figuring out where the bike racks are going to go on the site? Because I actually don't see any specific areas that say bike racks.
We don't have a diagram yet. Yeah. I think we owe you a diagram of, it's a combination. Again, there's a requirement to be met.
Okay.
And many of them are internal to the project because that's part of it. Some are external, some are short term, and I don't believe we have a diagram for that, but that's something that we certainly owe you.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions. Did you want to have something? Or, okay. First of all, the whole project, all the landscaping, are we using recycled water?
Yes.
Yeah, so everything will be purple pipe?
Yeah, we're bringing in the main line. There's a purple pipe that runs along Horton right now,
right.
So we're going to extend that up.
Perfect.
In the site.
And are you guys familiar with our community garden that's on Doyle Street? It's kind of triangular shaped as well. Mm-hmm. So I like the location of this one because I think it really draws the community out and together. And I think sun exposure is going to be probably the best there than anywhere. I'm just wondering, in terms of size, are we close to that size? It's kind of hard to tell.
I think it's actually, when we look, it's going to be bigger.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's some opportunity. We talked about this at the one of the citywide meetings, but we're trying to figure out exactly how much, because there's a railroad switch box there.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're trying to figure out
how much is
cities versus easement.
Right.
And so as we dial that in, I think that area will grow than what you see on plan
that would
right
be
now.
great.
So we're being a little conservative from that
Oh, good, because I think that that'll pull 1500 Park out and make that available to them and make it a true community garden and not just for Sherman-Williams. And I think that's a great location in terms of sun exposure. It's going to be really good. That's all the questions I had. So if that's it, we will.
I actually have one more question I forgot to ask. Can you guys talk a little bit about how the artists are chosen for the sculpture garden and the rest of the art that you're going to have on site?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to basically work with the city's public art ordinance, and I believe what we'll typically do is we'll hire a art consultant who will be basically project managing and spearheading that whole process. So we go out and solicit proposals from local artists. Typically, we like to keep it within the East Bay area. Have all kinds of interviews, presentations, work with the city, develop kind of general themes and concepts, and then go that route and have the consultant kind of shepherd it through the city's process, and then also through the eventual installation, maintenance, whatnot.
So your consultant will write up an RFP and do the interviews with the artists?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they get presented to the Public Art Commission?
Do you guys, I can't remember how you guys do that. Do you guys have something like that, or?
Commissioner Barrera, I think the next time we are here looking at this, we will have all those details sorted out. Right now, we are looking at conceptual programming of various spaces, and let's not get too much into details of. I mean, there are many questions regarding public art, regarding what their requirements are. So all that will be sorted out, and I do need to talk to this team. But for now, I think the focus should be that, do you like the location of the dog park? Do you like the location of, how they've divided up the different play areas and things like that? The details of actual materials, actual furniture, I like pretty pictures too, but I want to know what's real.
If I could just,
Thank you.
If I could just chime in on the public art piece of it. Typically, the Public Art Committee does not get involved in the selection of the art in private development projects. The public market, you may recall, is an exception to that because they have a development agreement that requires them to develop a public art master plan for their whole project, which has to be reviewed by the Public Art Committee under that development agreement, but normally they don't. But there's nothing to prevent Lennar from presenting their ideas to the committee if they want to get feedback.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Alrighty, no further questions. Then we will open the meeting up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please step forward, state your name for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi. Good evening, commissioners and community members. My name is Richard Hang, and I am a homeowner in Blue Star Corner. That's the development across the street from the new park, and I think the plans look great so far. I just wanted to make some quick comments. Since I'm a huge basketball fan, I think it would be fantastic if we keep some space allocated for people to go out there and play. And I think I saw in the latest design that was incorporated, but I just wanted to emphasize that I would appreciate if that remains there. And I see people playing at Doyle Hollis Park all the time, so I think it will definitely get some good use. So yeah, in all, I think it will be a great place for people to come together, get some exercise, and have some fun. And I hope you keep in your plans. The other thing I wanted to comment on is access to the views that are public access to the views that are available in the buildings. I think I'd appreciate being able to take advantage of those beautiful views as well, and go up there and maybe sit down and contemplate or something. So hope that could be part of the consideration as well as part of the designs. That's all I had. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. And Commissioner Barrera, would you like to start us off with comments?
Sure. I do like the overall programming of the site. I think that area number 5 might be a good location for the exercise equipment that we spoke about. And one comment that I was going to make is that so can you flip to page 2, please?
Nope. There you go.
There you go. I would really like to see the trees along where it's that path where it says number 9 to be planted in a more organic way, meaning not in such a straight line. You have a curved path there, so it would be nice if the trees weren't in a straight line, so that when people are walking through there, it felt a little bit more organic. But other than that, those are my only 2 comments. And I do think Chair Keller's idea about putting the bike share in that corner where the bathroom was going to be is a good idea, because it does have access to a street that's adjacent to that side. So that's basically it.
Thank you. Commissioner Benta.
So, well, actually, interesting, Commissioner. My feeling about the curved path is that it'd be great if you straightened it out. I personally love alleys of trees that are lined up in a linear fashion. I think it has a very creates a very strong urban design effect. In fact, you know, this project, which is so big, it's you know, basically 2 blocks, 2 city blocks, and represents such a huge investment by the applicant. You know, when you're doing something like this, you're creating like your own ecosystem here, with the buildings becoming mountains and so forth, and then the roads and the pathways between them create these automatic sight lines. So that's one of the great things that a project like this can do. It can create a sight line, and the applicant has been fantastic about maintaining this sight line from 45th Street all the way through the site, keeping buildings B2 and C back so that they're at the same plane as the buildings across the street. And I would highly encourage you to, at the end of that amazing sight line that you guys have created, that at the end of that you have a visual terminus of some sort, so that the experience of walking through this, which will be pretty fantastic, that you always have something that you're walking towards, whether it's a great sculpture or a fountain or a fantastic specimen tree, something like that. And I think that goes for 46th Street as well, that it deserves to have at the very end of it, next to the tracks and the greenway, a remarkable terminus. And that actually the terminus should be visible, those 2 terminuses should be visible to each other. And I think that's what can make a very magical experience in a city. And you're in a place now where you have this canvas that you can do all these things, you know, from the ground up. So I would encourage you to do that. And, you know, I'm very, I understand this is conceptual, and I echo my fellow commissioners' interest in seeing the details, the next edition around. And these photographs, you have a lot to live up to, I think. So, you know, I congratulate you. I think your taste is great, and I can't wait to see how close you get to it. I think that the design is really very thoughtful, and I would add one more thing. The open green space, I think the shape is great. You know, it does seem to create an almost natural theater type stage, where the stage in this case would be, if you go to, well, sheet 4, well, you can do it right on this sheet right here. At the north end of the green, you've got the walkway bowing out there. You might consider putting at the crown of that bowed walkway an actual area, stage area, you know, of some sort that people could, you know, perform at, theatrical, musical, whatever, just so that, you know, they don't end up wearing out the grass right in that area. It would just be sort of a nice invitation for people to actually perform at that spot. Those are my comments.
Interesting idea. I think it's good as far as it goes, but we need so many more details to really understand what's going to happen, particularly relocation of the restroom and the bike share, and details of how it will develop. And other than that, I think it's a great start.
Yeah, I also support the commissioner's comments about this seeming very preliminary, which is, you know, going in the right direction, but needing more detail. I too had looked at the lovely photos and was trying to locate them. so that bigger point about just noting a caption that, you know, that these are not, you know, that these are sort of creating an aesthetic that you're interested in pursuing, that would have helped. But in future, it would be great to locate things and to understand exactly what the intended detail is. I also wanted to note the shadow study. I'm really glad you provided it, but I also wanted an analysis, a kind of rundown of what you've learned from it and how it will impact the planting. And one thing that was apparent was, if you look at the solstice 3 p.m., you can see that due to the east-facing courtyard, that we discussed earlier in the evening, you are actually getting some sunlight on Hubbard, so that may be an advantage actually, and because every other time it's pretty shady. So that's just something to think about. You know, you've got these good materials. Articulating sort of what you're learning from them would help us. In terms of where things are located, I like the idea of the bathroom, but there is that question of the bathroom entry. So showing us what it would look like, helping us understand that this is the right place for it, I think that will be important. The basketball as an active activity is great. You should take a look at how close to residential units you want it. If people are playing late and there's a ball bouncing, sometimes that can be a nuisance. But the idea of having basketball and active activities, that's fantastic. I will agree and disagree with the commissioners in that I like the contrast of the curvy path with the streets. So I too like to walk in a straight line, but in this case, because you have the streets that are different, I like the variety that you're creating. So, thanks.
Okay, so just since we're on the curvy path and Path 9, it looks like you guys have maybe a variety of paving there, and that just the path is delineated by maybe concrete, and then you have pavers, it looks like striping. So I'm a proponent as walking primarily as transportation, and secondly as recreation. As a transportation path, we need it as direct and quick as possible. That way people will use it and it doesn't become inconvenient and too much work. So I like the look of the curvy path. I understand it aesthetically, but if we're going to promote other alternates to automobiles, we need to make those easy and convenient. So I like the idea if it's a cement curvy path that's even with some pavers, that if a person chooses to walk on a straight line and not follow the path, that's great. I want to address the thing about the park being considered, or not to be considered a destination. I understand we don't want this to be a park that draws tourists and things like that, but I think this should be a park that is a community park and invites all of Emeryville, and that it doesn't feel like a park that's just for Sherman-Williams. So that's the thing that we don't want it to be a destination, that we want it to be our park, is kind of come up a couple times, at least to the way I'm hearing it. And I just want to make sure that everyone in Emeryville feels welcome and using this park, and that it stays open that way. The idea of a sculpture walk, I like. I don't want to overuse sculptures. I do like the sculpture garden. I like the ability to sit there, maybe set up your laptop and enjoy that space. So maybe if we focused on a sculpture garden and then interspersed a few sculptures throughout and had kind of a walking tour where those were named and you could kind of seek those out and find those, I think that would kind of be a little bit more interesting. And when you do get down to the bike parking, the requirements for bike racks, etc., those just need to be plentiful for one thing, and they need to be placed in very open and very public, visible places. Oftentimes, like at the public market, they tuck those behind a building, a niche, and it became the only place you would see those was entering and exiting the parking structure, which allows thieves time to work on your bike and take things off of it and steal things from your pack. And so bicycles need to be eyes on the street kind of thing. They need to be where people can see them, so thieves don't feel so comfortable working on them. The bocce ball thing, I thought that was kind of an interesting remark, that we were going to ask the commercial tenants to hand out those balls, and that building will be closed on the weekends, so how will the balls be accessible on the weekends or the evening? Bocce ball is a very particular sport, and those who play it usually have their own balls, so providing a space which is very specific, you need a bocce ball court to be specific, but everyone can bring their own bocce balls, so I don't think that's a relevant situation. And then going to some of the photographs that Commissioner Banta talked about, the one thing I call is kind of like the blanket of lights that come out. I really think those would be really great, especially in the plaza near the art gallery. I happened to see those a couple years ago in Toronto and in Montreal. And during events, they became very, very festive. We actually happened to be in Toronto during Gay Pride, and they were able to make those rainbow. And at other times, you can make those solid blue, or for Earth Day, you can make them solid green. But it makes the space very, very festive. And it's something that you can turn off. It don't always have to be part of the atmosphere, but they are really very, very, I think they help create a sense of space, especially for an event that can really help out. The restroom area, I think placing it, now that I look at the plans, placing it like where that number 2 is a really good idea because it also makes it closer to the play spaces for parents to take their children to the restroom, and they don't feel that the children are vulnerable if they want, if you have an 8-year-old or 9-year-old that wants to use the bathroom themselves, it's not clear across the park where they can't be seen. So I'm really looking at that as that's probably a very, very good place for that. But I would like to see its positioning where the door is and things like that. I think that's a very good idea. The tree variety, I think, the commission either now or next time needs to decide whether we're going to stick with the Park Avenue plan or whether we're going to allow that one street to vary from that. I kind of support the varying because I don't think a monoculture is a good idea. I think of Dutch elm disease, not that ginkgos have that problem, but eventually they could as the climate changes. So I think a variety of trees, and I understand the idea at the Park Avenue plan, and I was here during the development of that. But I think for one street to kind of mix it up and just to make sure that we don't have a monoculture is a good idea. But so maybe the next time we meet, we decide whether we want to allow that or to stick with the plan as the Park Avenue has it. When you do your plant pellets and you show us these great pictures, please use the common names without the benefit of our resident landscape architect, Commissioner Donaldson here. I'm kind of out in La La Land when it comes to the Latin names, so if you could add the common names, I'm pretty much familiar with those. I love the idea of the visual terminus. I think of when he was mentioning that, I was thinking of the Getty Center in LA. And you could walk down there and they have an alley of trees that if you stand at this row of crepe myrtles, they look like one tree, but you stand slightly to one side there and you could see it's a row of 15 or something. And there's just all kinds of great ideas for doing that. And I think that terminus of creating a sense of place with those is a very, very good idea. And it could be with plants, could be with sculptures. We have a lot of opportunities. And then on the last item of speaking art and the art walk, and I know it was mentioned about a lot of opportunities for murals. This is just a personal taste, but I'm really fearful we're going to overuse murals. I think murals sometimes to me are a cheap way out to throw art into a space. And I'd like to see us limit it to kind of 2 and then go, if we're going to use wall art, we can use more 3-dimensional wall art. I'd like maybe even see some kinetic. I've seen some really great wall-mounted kinetic sculptures. Something that has a little bit more activity than simply a mural. And if we have like 3 or 4 or something, it becomes repetitive, tiresome, and it's almost like a cheap way out of doing public art when I think we have an opportunity to do something a lot more active and a lot more interactive. So those are my comments. And I think you guys have done a great job. I like the programming. I like where everything is. I think the dog park can work well there. I like the sculpture garden. It all looks really good. Okay, any other remarks or questions?
I can't resist. Can I make?
You can make another one.
Okay, so in the category of sight lines, which we've discussed for landscaping, it also works for architecture. And for example, if you look north down Hubbard Street to Building D, that's an opportunity to do something at that building face, right in the center, which creates a sightline terminus. Also in the alley between Building A and Building B2, looking north that ends in the gallery, that gallery facade right there presents another canvas upon which to put a visual terminus. So I just invite you to take advantage of these opportunities that you have created.
Can I make one more comment?
It's your opportunity.
I just want to reiterate my support for the curvy path because the area between Building 1 and Building 2 is 65 feet wide. So if somebody is trying to walk in and out of this space in a hurry, they have a lot of space to do that in a straight line. And I guess I kind of thought that the path would be a good space for a bike to go through, and it is relatively straight, and I would imagine that people would be riding their bike through here also for leisurely purposes, and it is kind of fun to go on your bike with this little bit of a little bit of a curve rather than going straight if you're not trying to exit the space very quickly. And there are other opportunities to do that on on the streets. So I like the curvy path.
Alrighty, so we're finished with this. Thank you guys very much, and we look forward to seeing you back again.
Take a break now?
Do we need a break now? Okay, so before we take a break, let me mention we're on to item 7, public hearings, and item A, the Nady site has been pulled from the agenda, so we're not talking that, and then I need to recuse myself for the next item, so when we come back from break, the vice chair will be managing the meeting.
Do we have a quorum? I guess we...
Yes, you do.
We barely do.
Yep, you're good.
What has been pulled?
Meeting.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. So I'll be presenting about the Public Market Directional Sign Program tonight. And I have here materials board that the applicant provided. And I just wanted to explain this real quick because you will see that it has these emergency veterinary care signs on it. You're like, that's not in the application. Interesting. But what it's trying to show is the push-through letters, how that works. So there's I'll bring it up to you so you can look at it closely, but it's showing the three-dimensionality of the signs. It has the materials here, and I just want to call out the area map. This is a sample of it here. What's in your packet and what will be in the presentation is the correct version. This is the previous version. It's been modified a little bit, and I'll talk with you about that. So just wanted to show that to you. Okay. And if you have any questions about any of the materials or any of the content of that, the applicant is here to answer your questions, and I would definitely refer to them for more details. Okay. All right, so walking through this, we're talking about the public market. You had a study session a while ago, so we're back again for approval tonight, hopefully, for the applicant here. So the public market, as you know, they're shifting Shellmound Street to the west. And for the background, we have the master sign program that was originally approved in 2005. So that's existing. In 2008, the Marketplace PUD was approved, which includes that shifting of Shellmound, relocating that. In 2011, the master sign program was updated, new materials and content, but because of that shifting of the street, it kind of voids a lot of that existing master sign program. So in December 2016, the current application you're reviewing tonight was submitted. You saw a study session for it in January. This one will replace that previous master sign program. We're not calling this one a master sign program because master sign programs generally cover tenant signage for rotating. So when tenants come and go over time, at like a mall, that would be a master sign program. This is a directional signage, so we're processing this as a major sign permit instead of a master sign program. And it also requires a variance because there are signs in the public right-of-way. So revisions since you've last seen the application, there's no more uplighting. The original version had uplighting on some of the signs. So all signs are now either internally illuminated or use downlighting. The sign locations are modified to remove signs with store information from the public right-of-way. When the question came to the commission of, do you think you'd be able to approve a variance for this? There was hesitancy of having any sort of advertising, anything could be perceived as advertising the public right-of-way. So now the signs that are in the public right-of-way do contain the public market logo and say the public market, but they do not have anything specific to stores like saying Guitar Center or something like that, for example. Most of the monument signs that you saw in the past that were in the public right-of-way have been eliminated and have been moved up onto streetlight poles. We'll see that in a few moments. And the only sign in the public right-of-way that oh, sorry, I already went over that with the public market logo and name. And this number of signs has been reduced from 17 to 15 signs. And there's bicycle parking signs now, so we'll go through that. So here's a site map indicating the different types of signs and their locations. You can see that they are mostly along Shellmound here, and then there's a few over here at Parcel C and on 63rd. So the proposed sign materials are wood planks, white acrylic letters, aluminum paneling, green public market logo, and exterior illumination. The only variation from that is that there's one window graphic for bicycles now, which is not going to, of course, incorporate wood planks. 15 proposed sign types. There's one primary monument ID sign that's 9 feet tall. There's 5 kiosks. Those have all been moved out of the public right-of-way. Like I said, this contains the directions to stores and other features. So those are all on private property now. There's 5 vehicular directional signs, mostly on light poles. There's some parking ID signs and bicycle parking signs as well. So here are the 5 locations of the signs in the public right-of-way. And these ones here that I'm moving the arrow around at are the light poles, and then the only one that's not on a street light pole is just north of the driveway to Parcel B. So this is the 9-foot tall primary ID monument sign. This is basically replacing an existing sign with a completely different design. And it has a top-down illumination. One of the critiques from before was that the down lighting here blocked part of the sign element, so it's been redesigned so the angle of the necks on that is prevents blocking the actual sign content. Here's an illumination of that showing that the sign is not blocked by the lighting elements itself. That's also on private property, by the way, because it does contain some store information there. So here are the directory kiosks. And the necks on this have also been changed, and the height of the necks has been raised so it won't conflict with somebody's head trying to look at the sign. And here's an illumination of that, what that would look like at night. And here's the sign. So for the map content. So how this has been changed is that now shows very clearly to Amtrak, shows a little pedestrian there. It also has Christie Avenue Park and says to Christie Avenue on this side. The bike parking has been increased to not only show the New Seasons Market, but these smaller bicycle symbols wherever there's other bike racks available. And there's also a greater contrast than the original sign, so it's a little bit easier to see some of the features on the sign. And there's crosswalks also. It shows where the crosswalks are. This is accurate representation of where crosswalks are in the project area. So the one vehicular directional freestanding sign, so this is in the public right-of-way, that's a monument sign here. So this is about 5.5 feet tall, and it does illuminate at night. And these are the new pole signs. So these were previously on the ground, and staff had a lot of concerns about sight lines and it blocking the views of pedestrians from cars and cars from pedestrians. So we requested the applicant raise those up higher so that wouldn't provide any sight line problems. And this is what the applicant has proposed. So these are in 4 areas, as I said.
Are they illuminated?
Kind of from the street light. Oh. But not in and of themselves, so much like most street pole light signs would be. So there's also 2 what they're calling parking ID attached signs. So this is at the entrances to parking garages, a projecting sign, and those are illuminated as well. And then we have the bike parking signs that they've added. So this is completely new from last time, and this is at the New Seasons entrance. So there's one that's a window sign and one that's actually like right by the elevator. So we'll see some renderings of that. And now moving into the rendering section. So here we are on Shell Mound facing north at the southern tip of the project, and here is that project ID sign. That's not in the public right-of-way, it's just set back onto private property. Moving north, so we're still northbound here on Shell Mound, and here's an example of the parking directional sign. And there again is an example of parking directional sign a little bit closer up. And here we have one of the projecting parking signs. And so that one would be illuminated because it's not on a pole. And here we have the driveway entrance to parcel B, and here is another one of those kiosks, and to the other side of the driveway this is that one monument sign that remains for parking directionals. Now staff had concerns about this as well, people exiting the driveway there onto Shell Mound, and would they be able to see pedestrians or oncoming traffic. There's not a sidewalk where that parking sign is. The sidewalk is across the street, but we were concerned still about sight lines there and bicycles, for example. So they did a study showing the approach as if you were exiting the parking garage. So that's what we're looking at now, exiting the parking garage from parcel B, and north would be to the right of the screen, south would be to the left of the screen. And you can see that the sight line here is pretty good where the stop line is in relationship to the monument sign itself. As you approach getting closer, and then the closest view right before you would make a turn. So staff was satisfied with this and felt that the renderings showed that the monument sign wasn't actually blocking the sight lines here. And then we have facing the other directions. So this bright color here is a kind of mural sort of installation on parcel B. Here we have 63rd Street, and this would be another parking directional sign. And And once you're on 63rd Street, this is, yeah, as if you had just made that right-hand turn. There's a parking sign there going into the building. And then here we have the one by Christie Avenue Park. So Christie Avenue Park is in the foreground here. This would be the Emmy apartment complex. And then here we are at the alley that's between the tower building and the brick building. So this is the one wall sign for a kiosk. All the other kiosk signs are the monument style that we saw before. And then here we are looking at New Seasons Market at the entrance, and the one bike parking sign here by the elevator right in the center. So you actually have to turn into it to see the elevator symbol. And then the window graphic saying that there's bike parking by going up the elevator. So for major design review, it was all the findings staff was able to list out. For the proposed signs are necessary. The proposed signs are no larger than necessary. They're proportional to who's viewing them. So for example, if you're a pedestrian, the kiosks are sized to be looked at very closely. And if you're coming down Shell Mound, the streets are, the signs are a little bit larger, so you can see them approaching from a distance. The proposed signs do comply with the planning regulations and design principles therein. And the proposed signs keep with the visual character of the area, with the materials and design quality. At the previous study session, the Planning Commission seemed to very much feel that the materials being proposed were appropriate for the site area. They're readable, as I said, from appropriate distances and vantage points, and they relate well to the buildings and architectural features. General design review findings were made that it's consistent with the general plan and urban design goals, that it conforms to the Emeryville design guidelines, and that the project is of a high design quality. So for the variance findings, there's 5 findings that need to be made for that because of the signs in the public right-of-way. So the proposal for which the variance is sought is consistent with the general plan, and special circumstances, are there any special circumstances applicable to the project? Most of the Emeryville shopping areas consist of large parking lots where storefronts and parking areas are easily visible from the street or directly from private parking areas when you go up and down the parking aisles. This is a more urbanized setting, as first sort of one like this in Emeryville, where you actually have to go around corners to find things, and there's lots of internal stores at the public market. So this creates a need for this directional signage that's unique to this part of the city. Also, the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of the property, and it doesn't constitute a special privilege. The proposed signs are directional, not constituting a special privilege, and the public market differs from other commercial centers in the city, as we discussed with the circulation. And the granting of variance would not be detrimental to adjacent properties or sightlines. And the conditions which the variances are based on would not be generally applicable to other properties in the same zoning district, because this plan covers the entire zoning district. It covers the PUD, so there's no other properties in this zoning district. So staff recommends approval for this. I'm here and available if you have any questions, as is the applicant.
Any questions?
I'm wondering about the location of the wall mount, the projecting parking sign on Shell Mound. It seems like it's not near the entry to the parking garage itself, and it seems like it could be confusing because you have the bike lane there and you have the projecting sign and
this one,
yeah, and I understand that it's trying to give a forewarning of something that's around the corner, but it's still, I'm a little bit concerned that it could be confusing, because it looks, I can't tell from that graphic whether there's an arrow saying parking that way, keep going, or whether it's saying the parking, whether it's identifying the parking garage entry, which isn't there.
Yeah, it would appear that one needs an arrow.
I'll let the applicant respond to that one, if that's
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening. I think we'd be fine with adding an arrow there, just based on the, and I can't zoom in, but I think it's fairly close to the end of the building. You know, I think that was generally our thought. It's at the far north end. You're kind of, we initially, if you remember some of the earlier study session drawings, we had some signs further to the south indicating, you know, keep going, and I think we finally settled on just having one essentially pretty close to the north end of that parcel B garage, So we thought that that would be fairly helpful for people to just say, oh, okay, I'm here, I found it. And then one more sign, I think once you get around, because this building has that interesting little, call it gazebo at the north end. But I think if you guys felt like you wanted an arrow, we could probably add an arrow.
But it has parking has a sign on both sides of it, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if you wanted to eliminate both. I mean, I think also you could look at it from a pedestrian standpoint, that if you're walking down the street and you're looking for where the, just a reminder where you left your car or whatever, you can go, all right, I left it there.
If you saw it, you'd have to turn around and go back.
Well, but if you're walking to the north and you see it, you keep going.
But if you're heading south and looking up at that sign, it doesn't tell you where the parking is.
Well, sure. At that point, you probably would have left your car, I guess, so maybe you'd already know. We're happy to adjust it as you'd prefer.
So I have a question.
Sure.
I saw some of the light pole images there. I don't know if you can flip to one of them.
I can.
And it was unclear to me how they were attached.
Tom, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. They're attached with a bracket around the post.
Okay, so if you go back to the other image, there it is. I don't see any brackets. Or they're just really light.
I think there's straps on there.
Yeah.
I can't see them real well.
Okay, and I guess that question of it doesn't seem very realistic the way it's imaged. So
can we get back to the drawing of that?
Sure.
There.
Okay,
You can see
and
the
so-
straps, and
yeah.
it's a little more to scale on the pole too.
okay, yeah.
Now, those particular lights are not illuminated, are they? Those signs, I mean?
Those signs are not illuminated in and of themselves. They are lit by the pole light that they're on.
Got it.
So you know more about color relationships than I do, but I find that the arrow sort of recedes, and you've got the big P, which I don't like that the public market symbol is in the public right-of-way, but since it looks like P for parking, that's a little bit, I can live with that, but it looks like that arrow recedes in that it's the least visible part of the sign, and that seems to be one of the more important parts of the sign, to tell people which way they're going.
Yeah, I mean, I think we felt like the green was actually a little more eye-catching. And speaking with our designers, we like the green. We've used it throughout the site. The thought was that keeping it in white, it might end up losing it. But if you kept it in green, it might stand out a little bit more adjacent to the white parking lettering.
That's the green on a black panel, whereas the drawing looks more of a charcoal panel. So it looks a little more muted in your drawing on the screen.
Okay. And can you point out which of the parking pole-mounted signs are two-sided with the parking on it, and which ones just say public market on one side? Because it seems like the placement of several of these poles, you could have the parking indication on both sides rather than having the public market logo, or,
Yeah, let me get to a site plan here. So if you're, this is probably as good as any. No, this one's probably fine. So starting from the right, C1, sign 2, that would just have signage as you're driving northbound, the parking with the arrow, because that's the direction of the parking. C1, sign type 1, or sign number 1, the same. C13 down on the lower left-hand side would be the same, driving to the north. That one we may end up, I have to see if we design that one, if we have the individual sign for this. I don't know if we do. That one could take this on the front view. It could essentially have two front views. You could have a left arrow and a right arrow. I don't know if we thought about that. Or did we? We did? Okay. Just to hit both directions if you're coming north or south on Christie. And then the only other one is C1, and you could, or 4, sign type 4, or sign number 4, And you could do it the same way because people could access 63rd Street coming north or south on Shell Mound. So I think you'd probably have 2 with the parking and the arrow, and then 2 on both sides, and then 2 that have the parking on one side and the public market logo on the other.
Okay.
Question.
So D2 would have public market on one side and an arrow on the other side?
Well, D2, I think we just had, let me find it, this one. It doesn't, at this point, subject to your comments, it doesn't have an arrow.
Okay.
So that particular image there, maybe you can help me. This is a typical architect question. You show the 3 views, and the straight-on view, the side view you call it, shows black, and then you've got gray bar on either side. That's the bracket behind it, correct?
That's right.
And then you've got show the wood paneling on either side. And then what is the material that the wood paneling is attached to that is exposed at that point below the black?
It's an aluminum cabinet where it's black. You'll see it on end. You see it on the faces where it's shown in the drawing as black.
Well, I see the black,
Yep.
but then right in the side view, which is the narrow view,
Yep.
right below it, there's a little bit of gray.
Right down here?
Yeah, what is that? Were you intending to have the wood return there, or was that intended to be left exposed? And if so, what is it exposing?
I think the wood would return, yeah.
Well, I know it doesn't on some of your other signs. You just have it. I was just curious.
Right. No, I think it would return.
So my other question is, have you guys dreamed up a good backstory for why you have this cut corner on the lower portion of all your signage? I mean, I like your tree. I was just last time you presented, you said you were going to come back with a big story about.
No, I think that's right. I think that the angular nature of the P was our graphic designers carrying over to that kind of chamfered edge at the corner on the sign as well. Because if you look at the P, the angle of the P,
oh, I see.
It kind of reflects that same 45-degree angle.
Yeah, well, you still have time to make up a good story if you want.
That'll have to suffice for now.
And so I have another question on sheet 2.0A, page 2.0A.
2.0A. Towards the front?
Yeah.
Oh, those are yours? Okay. Thank you.
It's shows the
Directory.
monument signs. There it is. There you go. So here's my question.
Sure.
Do you feel that in the side view that shows the lighting, the bar cantilevered over on either side, do you feel that that is out of pull-up range for some energetic high school student?
You know, at 8 feet, I think probably, you know, if you wanted to, you could. I mean, quite frankly, it's I'll say in retail property management, you are always finding things that you didn't expect that people will figure out a way to abuse. And if we spent all our time trying to design around that, we'd be kind of going in circles. I think we do the best we can, and you try to ensure that people don't. The nice thing is that most of these are out in the open, and I think it would probably be a deterrent from people kind of climbing up on them. You know, I think unfortunately it's probably, given our lighting options, this is probably preferred to having something like what we showed initially, of having something in the ground projecting up.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where you have to get comfortable with the trade-off of kind of the lesser of two evils sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a nice solution. I'm just...
No, it's the other thing I'll say is that we're never really surprised when people will figure out new and interesting ways of trying to play around on property. But
yeah, I don't know how high kids can jump these days, but but you might want to find that answer out and then adjust your height accordingly.
That's a good point. Maybe we can change the gooseneck angle or something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. My question is actually for Navarre. Navar, what's the relationship between the directional sign and the master sign program? Because we have two packets here. So is the master sign program what the tenants use for their signage inside of the building?
Right. So typically what a master sign program means, and what it is currently defined as under our code, is for multiple tenants with 5 or more usually, and that it's to actually identify that store frontage. And so it's that each space has a predictable, somewhat equitable, easy to manage sign situation. So this program does not cover that. So while it does have, as you can see in the slide here, some store names, it's not as if, let's say, Guitar Center, which will leave and someone else were to come in, it wouldn't dictate what was on that store frontage. So that would be what a master sign program is for. While the previous program that this is replacing was titled master sign program, we didn't feel that that was appropriate for this package with our current definition of master sign program. And when we had the sign study session recently, one of the things we discussed was maybe it'd be appropriate to have more of a directional sign program. We don't have that yet, so we're calling it a major sign permit.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So then there is no change to the master sign program as part of what we're talking about right now.
Well, do you mean like definition in general, or do you mean to this? So that goes away.
This, oh, okay.
So, right, so what's being proposed right now would completely void the existing program and replace it with this.
Okay.
So as part of that, also the applicant is required to develop a master sign program for those tenants as a separate package.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, so what's the projected gap time between having a master sign program? I mean, there's people coming and going into the marketplace, in the public market, yeah.
Well, primarily the tenants that we would have that have exterior signage are going to be in the Parcel B structure, and that's not going to start construction until probably later this year, and probably more like January. So we've still got a little bit of time, we believe, to finalize the master sign plan, and we want to get this approved first, and then we would be working on the master sign plan for tenant signage.
What about the people that are, all the new little stalls that are opening up in the public
Yeah, they don't have
market?
exterior signage.
Paradita does, but...
Yeah, Paradita, I think, submitted a separate plan on their own. Yeah.
So the individual stores like Paradita is a good example. They did actually a minor design review because they had exterior changes to the facade, and we included the sign within the minor design review submittal. Yeah, so any other signage that would be exterior that would come in between now and then would have to be looked at individually, but the idea would be for that to happen.
So there's a
quickly.
stopgap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
So I have one question more. The wood planks you refer to that are a part of your signage?
Yes.
3/4-inch wood planks. Is that real wood? And if so, do you know what type and what the finish would be?
Yeah, it's a reclaimed wood product. Tom, you want to... We've used one product already at Public Market. It was a reclaimed wood by a company called Terra May. We've learned, if you've been to the food hall lately, it's not a great exterior application. We found another product from a company in Texas that we're going to be replacing that with, and we'll likely use that in this scenario.
And is it glued to the subsurface?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
No further questions?
Just a quick question about the halogen or LED. They seem like pretty different lighting types. Is there a sense of... Sorry, the halogen or LED, they seem like pretty different signage, lighting types. Are you leaning one way or the other?
LEDs would be nice if we can get them bright enough.
Okay.
There's only the tall kiosks that have them, so it's not a real wide sign, not a real big sign, so we probably don't need an awful lot of light on those. So LEDs would probably work.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll open the meeting to public comment. See none, we'll close the meeting. discuss it. I presume we want to pass it, but does anybody have any recommendations of changes to this?
I would like to see an arrow on that one projecting sign, just because it is far from the garage entry, and to get into that garage, you're still having to cross a bike lane, and I don't want to see people trying to move over before they should be moving over.
I would agree with that.
Do you want to make that a condition of approval, or is that just a recommendation to the applicant?
I would make it a condition.
No, that would be a recommendation for a condition of approval, but we have to vote on it first. And
Right, I'm just trying to clarify what your direction is so far.
Yeah.
Any other comments, or?
Well, I don't know if the recommendation to use LEDs would be a recommendation, but I think that would be something to be suggested for energy conservation reasons.
Any further?
My only comment is I think it's a very handsome sign system. Well done.
Yeah, I would second that. And I would encourage a green arrow, because I agree that if you put a white arrow with the wording that says parking, you might not notice it. So green arrow is a good idea.
So do we want to make that a condition of approval or just a recommendation?
It's in their drawings already, so we don't need to.
But for the new arrow, are you making
yeah,
that
no, it would be the same as the other arrows.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have a motion to approve?
To approve? Yeah, I make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
With the extra arrow?
With the condition that you mentioned.
Thank you. I'll second.
Do we have a vote?
Okay. So that is with the added condition of approval for an arrow on that one sign, correct? All right. Commissioner Banta?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrera?
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson?
Aye.
And Vice Chair Cardoza?
Aye.
5 ayes. The application is approved. This decision may be appealed to the City Council within 15 days.
I think it's a very attractive signage system. Thank you.
What happened to the paperless world?
Forest one.
Alrighty, back in the saddle, we've got two other items, or actually just one other item before adjournment. And are there any commissioner comments? Nothing? No? Well, I didn't attend formally the grand opening of the Paradisa restaurant in Public Market. Paradita. And it seemed to be very well received. A lot of people were in attendance. We had quite a few. There was Councilmember Bowders and Councilmember Martinez was there, and it was spilling out into the marketplace, so it looked very good. And Mark Steffens of City Center was there and said that all the stalls that there are currently doing better than expected.
Great.
Yeah, so we look forward to more restaurants opening up and a very good, successful public market. So I was very happy to see that. Okay, nothing else. We can adjourn before 10 o'clock.